There are gods in the universe, and then there are the things that pretend to be gods. In the space between worlds where reality bleeds and screams, sometimes the universe makes mistakes. Sometimes it reaches into places it shouldn't, pulls at threads that were never meant to unravel, and drags something pure into an ocean of filth. Today's story is about one such mistake, or perhaps the greatest act of defiance the warp ever committed against itself. If you crave more tales from the Dark Millennium, join the faithful and subscribe. Because in the 41st millennium, even legends need witnesses to carry their stories forward. The Emperor protects those who stand vigil with us. The warp storm designated Tempus Pythia had raged for 3 months across the Segmentum Obscurus, swallowing 17 Imperial worlds before the Navy's Nobilite even finished calculating its trajectory. On the bridge of the Navy vessel Eternal Vigilance, navigator Yelena Osovich watched her charts dissolve into meaningless static, the warp currents twisting into patterns that violated every principle she'd studied in her 60 years of service. The storm wasn't behaving like a natural phenomenon. It was reaching, grasping, pulling at something beyond the veil of real space, with the desperation of a drowning man clawing toward light. In the swirling madness of the immaterium, where thought becomes reality and reality becomes nightmare, a golden cord of light appeared. It shouldn't exist here. The warp knows only corruption, mutation, and the screaming souls of the damned. But this light held steady, pure, burning with a truth that made the chaos gods themselves recoil. The storm wrapped around it like grasping fingers and pulled. Diana of Themyscira had been pursuing Ares through the boundaries of reality when the universe lurched sideways. The god of war had opened a rift, seeking to escape to a dimension beyond the Olympians' reach. She'd followed without hesitation, her lasso trailing light through the darkness. But the passage twisted wrong. Forces she didn't recognize, hungry, aware, malevolent, seized her mid-transit. Reality shattered like glass around her, and she fell through layers of existence that screamed in colors that shouldn't exist. She hit ground hard enough to crack rockcrete. The impact would have killed a mortal. For Diana, it merely knocked the breath from her lungs and sent her skidding across a surface slick with substances she didn't want to identify. She rolled to her feet, battle instincts honed over millennia, bringing her sword to ready position before her eyes fully focused. The sky was wrong. It burned an ugly yellow-brown, choked with chemical smog and ash that fell like black snow. Massive structures stretched toward the heavens. Towers of twisted metal and stone that climbed kilometers high, their surfaces crawling with lights and movement. The air tasted of promethium exhaust and decay. In the distance, something exploded with a deep crump that shook the ground beneath her boots. Then she heard the screaming. Diana moved toward the sound without thought, her body responding to the universal call of those in need. She vaulted over rubble that might once have been buildings, her enhanced vision cutting through the smog to reveal the battlefield ahead. What she saw made even her warrior's heart clench. Thousands of humans in gray-green uniforms fought desperately against a horde of twisted figures. The defenders fired primitive but brutally effective laser weapons, each shot burning through the air with a sharp crack. But their enemies absorbed the hits with laughter, their bodies warped beyond human form, extra limbs sprouting from shoulders, faces split by too many mouths, skin covered in pustules and mutations that wept diseased fluids. Some wore the remnants of the same uniform as the defenders. These were corrupted humans, and they were winning. A woman in officer's insignia stood atop a ruined transport, bolt pistol in one hand. chainsaw sword screaming in the other. "For the Emperor!" she roared, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "Second platoon, covering fire! Fourth platoon, fix bayonets and prepare to—" An explosion cut her off. Diana watched the officer disappear in a bloom of fire and shrapnel. The defenders' line wavered. The corrupted masses surged forward with howls of triumph that sounded like obscene prayers. Diana crossed the remaining distance in 3 bounds that carried her over the heads of the desperate soldiers. She landed among the enemy with her sword already moving. The first corrupted human died before it realized she was there, her blade passing through its neck with perfect precision. The second lunged at her with claws dripping toxins. She caught its arm, twisted, and heard bones snap before she drove her knee into its spine. The third opened its mouth to release a cloud of spores, but her bracers came up in a crossblock that reflected the substance back into its face. The defenders stopped firing, stunned into silence. The corrupted masses hesitated, their advance faltering as they processed this new element on the battlefield. Diana stood among the bodies, her armor unstained by the blood and filth surrounding her, and raised her voice with the command of someone who had led warriors for 3,000 years. "Rally to me! Form ranks and show these abominations what humanity can do when it stands together!" She didn't know where she was. She didn't understand what had happened to these people, or what had transformed their enemies into monsters. But she understood battle. And she understood that innocent people needed someone to stand between them and darkness. In the 41st millennium, that was the most dangerous thing anyone could try to do. The Imperial Guardsmen of the Cadian 217th had seen 17 months of continuous combat on Hive World Tertius Prime. They'd watched entire companies consumed by the Chaos Uprising, seen their commissars executed for insufficient faith, and learned that the only reliable truth in the universe was that tomorrow would be worse than today. So when a woman in strange armor appeared among the enemy and started killing cultists with her bare hands, their first instinct wasn't hope. It was suspicion. Sergeant Marcus Vale had survived this long by trusting his instincts and his laser gun in that order. Right now, both were screaming warnings. The woman moved wrong, too fast, too graceful, like she was dancing rather than fighting. Her armor gleamed despite the ash and blood. Her sword cut through corrupted flesh without the machine spirit blessing of a power weapon. And most damning of all, she showed no fear. Only the insane or the corrupted felt no fear in the 41st millennium. "Sergeant?" Private Corvus kept his laser gun trained on the woman's back, waiting for orders. "What is she?" "I don't know," Vale admitted. "But she's killing the enemy, so we use the opportunity. Third squad, advance on my mark. Stay spread and keep your fields of fire clear. If she turns on us, you burn her down without hesitation." The woman didn't turn on them. Instead, she pressed forward into the cultist horde with methodical efficiency that reminded Vale of the few space marines he'd seen in action. That same sense of impossible competence, of a weapon perfectly designed for its purpose. But space marines were 7 feet of ceramite-clad fury. This woman stood maybe 6 feet tall and fought with a controlled precision that seemed almost gentle despite the lethality of every strike. She caught a cultist's rusted blade between her bracers and snapped it with a twist of her wrists. Her counterstrike took the cultist's head off cleanly. Another rushed her from behind, pustules covering its back, ready to explode and spray her with plague toxins. She spun, her golden lasso appearing in her hand as if from nowhere, and wrapped it around the cultist's neck. The creature froze, its eyes going wide. "What have you done?" the woman demanded. "What transformed you into this?" The cultist's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment, Then words poured out in a raw, agonized voice, utterly different from the howling madness of moments before. Grandfather promised, no more pain, no more hunger. Just the garden, just the rot and the peace and the... It choked, thrashing against the golden rope. I can't lie. Emperor, save me. What have I become? The woman's face showed something Vale hadn't expected. Pity. She drew her sword across the cultist's throat in a single merciful motion, then released the lasso as the body fell. Form on the sergeant! Vale roared, shaking off his shock. Whatever she'd done to make the cultists speak true didn't matter. They had ground to take. Advance by fire teams! The Emperor protects! The Emperor protects! His men echoed, their voices gaining strength. The strange woman had given them something they'd lost weeks ago. Momentum. Diana felt the soldiers move up behind her in disciplined units, their weapons adding supporting fire as she carved a path through the enemy. These warriors were brave. She'd give them that. Outmatched, outgunned, fighting enemies that should have broken their sanity, yet they held formation and followed orders. It reminded her of mortal soldiers she'd fought beside in other wars, in other worlds. That unique human courage that emerged when everything was lost except the person standing beside you. But the weapons troubled her. The rifles they carried burned flesh with concentrated light. Effective, but inelegant. The heavier weapons mounted on tripods fired explosive shells that chewed through corrupted bodies with casual brutality. And everywhere she looked, skulls decorated the equipment. Skulls on gun casings, skulls on armor plates, skulls carved into the walls of the ruined buildings around them. Humanity had survived in this place, but at what cost? A roar split the air, deeper and more bestial than the cultists' cries. Diana's combat senses screamed warning a second before something massive crashed through a building to her left. The creature stood 12 feet tall, its body a nightmare fusion of human and something else, muscles bulging with unnatural growth, an extra arm sprouting from its shoulder, and a face that split vertically to reveal rows of grinding teeth. "Chaos spawn!" someone screamed. "Fall back! Fall back!" The soldiers scattered, their discipline breaking under the weight of primal terror. Diana understood. This thing radiated wrongness on a fundamental level, as if reality itself rejected its existence. But she'd faced gods and monsters before. She'd stared down Ares himself. She didn't run. The spawn charged her with surprising speed, all three arms reaching to rend and tear. Diana sidestepped the first swipe, blocked the second with her bracers, and felt the impact drive her back 3 meters, her boots carving furrows in the rockcrete. The thing was strong, stronger than it should be, as if something beyond muscle powered its strikes. It pressed the attack, roaring in mindless fury. Diana gave ground, analyzing its movements, looking for patterns in the chaos. There, it favored the left side slightly, compensating for the uneven weight of its mutation. And there, it telegraphed its power strikes with a flexing of its back muscles. She waited for the next power strike, then moved inside its reach as the blow whistled overhead. Her sword found the joint where the third arm connected to its shoulder and carved through corrupted flesh. Black ichor sprayed across her armor. The spawn shrieked and backhanded her with its remaining arms. The blow caught her across the chest and launched her through the air. She crashed through the wall of a building, rolled with the impact, and came up on her feet with her sword ready. The spawn followed, smashing through the same wall in a shower of rubble. Behind it, Diana saw the soldiers regrouping. The sergeant, she could read the determination in his scarred face, was organizing a firing line. Good! Let them see that monsters could bleed. Now! She shouted and dove aside. 20 laser guns opened fire simultaneously. The concentrated beams seared into the spawn's back, burning through its corrupted flesh. It turned toward this new threat, giving Diana the opening she needed. She leaped onto its back, drove her sword through the base of its skull, and twisted. The spawn collapsed like a felled tree, its death rattle fading into a gurgle. Diana extracted her blade and dropped to the ground, breathing heavily. Not from exhaustion, from the realization settling over her like a shroud. This wasn't a war. This was extermination. Both sides fought with a totality that suggested no negotiation was possible. No mercy would be given. These twisted cultists weren't conquerors or raiders. They were a plague that had to be purged. She'd been in dark places before, but never anywhere this dark. Sergeant Vael approached cautiously, his lace gun lowered but not holstered. Up close, Diana could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the chemical burns on his hands, the way his armor bore the scars of months of continuous fighting. "Who are you?" he asked simply. Diana considered how to answer. The truth, that she was an Amazon princess from another dimension, daughter of Zeus, champion of the gods, seemed absurd even to her in this moment. "Someone who wants to help," she said finally. Vael studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you'd better come with us. Our commander needs to know about you before the commissariat decides you're a heretic and puts a bolt round through your skull." The command bunker squatted beneath 15 meters of reinforced rockcrete, its walls lined with flickering pict screens showing battlefield feeds from across Tertius Prime's northern hive sectors. Colonel Dmitri Kasser had held this position for 43 days, watching his regiment bleed away company by company while High Command promised reinforcements that never arrived. He'd stopped believing in miracles around the same time he'd stopped counting his dead. Then Sergeant Vael brought him a woman who claimed she wanted to help, and Kasser's careful atheism took a severe blow. She stood in his command center, radiating an aura of health that seemed obscene in a war zone. No radiation scarring, no chemical burns, no haunted look in her eyes. Her armor bore designs he didn't recognize, stars and eagles rendered in styles that predated imperial aesthetics by millennia, if his vague recollection of ancient Terra history served. Her weapons defied easy classification. The sword showed no power field generator. The golden rope coiled at her hip emitted a faint luminescence that made his tech priest advisor physically recoil. "Your report, Sergeant," Kasser ordered, buying time to think. Vael delivered the account with admirable brevity. The woman's sudden appearance, her combat effectiveness, the spawn kill, and, most troubling, what she'd done with the rope. "It made the cultist speak true," Vael concluded. "Forced it to confess what it had become. I've never seen anything like it, sir." Kasser hadn't either. And in 17 years of Imperial Guard service, that was saying something. He turned his attention to the woman. "You have a name?" "Diana," she replied. "Diana of Themyscira." "Never heard of it. What planet? What system?" "Not a planet in your Imperium." She said the word carefully, as if testing its weight. "I'm from somewhere else, very far from here." That should have been his cue to call for the commissar. Strange warriors appearing from nowhere claiming extra-imperial origins, textbook chaos corruption, or Xenos infiltration. But something in her directness, in the way she met his eyes without flinching or calculating, made him hesitate. "Show me," he said instead, gesturing to the golden rope. "Show me what it does." Diana uncoiled the lasso with practiced ease, the rope seeming to extend further than its physical length should allow. The glow intensified slightly, casting warm light across the bunker's grim interior. She looked at Kasser with an expression he couldn't quite read. Concern? Warning? "The lasso of Hestia compels truth," she said. "Anyone bound by it cannot lie, cannot hide behind deception. They speak only what they truly believe and know." "Prove it," Kasser demanded. "Bind yourself. Tell me your purpose here." To his surprise, Diana smiled slightly. "Very well." She wrapped the lasso around her own wrist, the golden cord pulsing with light. When she spoke again, her voice carried a resonance that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "I am Diana, Princess of Themyscira, daughter of Hippolyta and Zeus. I came to this place by accident, pulled through a rift while pursuing an enemy. I do not serve your emperor. I've never heard of him until today, but I serve the cause of justice, the protection of the innocent, and the defeat of tyranny in all its forms. I see people suffering here. I see courage in the face of horror. So I will fight beside you until I find a way home, or until I fall. That is my truth." The words hung in the air like a judge's verdict. Kasser felt his chest tighten. She'd just confessed to not serving the emperor, grounds for immediate execution, and somehow made it sound like a virtue. More troubling, he believed every word. "Daughter of Zeus?" Tech Priest Archon spoke for the first time, his mechanical voice skeptical. "The ancient Terran god? Impossible. Those were myths, pre-Unity superstitions. In my world, they were real," Diana said calmly, releasing the lasso. "As real as whatever powers those corrupted humans outside worship." Kasser's Vox operator, Lieutenant Yana, stiffened at her station. "Colonel, urgent transmission from Sector 7 Gamma. Captain Orel reports mass cultist assault on the water reclamation facility. His forces are being overrun. He's requesting immediate—" She paused, listening to her earpiece. "Sir, the captain is screaming. Something about voices in his head, about seeing the truth of the Emperor's lies." The command center went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The facility's officers were breaking under psychic assault. If the cultists took the water plant, half the hive would die of thirst within a week. Kasser made his decision with the speed that had kept him alive this long. "Diana of Themyscira, you want to help? Prove it. Sergeant Vale, take 3rd Company and our new ally to Sector 7 Gamma. Relieve Captain Orel if he's still functional. If he's turned, execute him and anyone else showing signs of corruption." He fixed Diana with a hard stare. "Can you fight whatever's attacking their minds?" "I can't make promises about powers I don't understand," Diana replied honestly. "But I'll do everything in my ability to help your people." "Good enough. Vale, move out. Emperor protects." "Emperor protects," Vale echoed automatically, then glanced at Diana. "What about her? What does she protect?" Diana picked up her shield, settling it on her arm with the ease of long practice. "The innocent, the vulnerable, those who cannot protect themselves." She met Kasser's gaze squarely. "Same as you, I suspect, before you learned to wrap it in different words." Kasser didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. After she left with Vale's squad, Lieutenant Yana spoke quietly. "Sir, you're not really trusting her, are you? We don't know what she is." "I know what she's not," Casa replied, still watching the door Diana had exited through. "She's not afraid. In 43 days, everyone in this bunker has learned fear. We've earned it. We've watched friends die screaming, seen reality break down, felt our faith crack under the weight of what we're fighting." He turned back to the tactical displays. "But she walked into this hell and didn't even flinch. That means she's either chaos-touched beyond recognition," he paused, "or she's something we've forgotten how to be." "What's that?" "Sir? Hopeful." The journey to Sector 7 Gamma took Diana and Vale's company through 3 kilometers of ruined hive infrastructure. They moved through corridors that should have bustled with millions of workers, but now stood empty except for the distant sounds of fighting. Diana noticed details that troubled her. The devotional texts carved into every surface, the armed checkpoints every 100 meters, even in civilian areas, the hollow-eyed children huddling in doorways who scattered at the soldiers' approach. This wasn't just a civilization at war. This was a civilization that had been at war so long it had forgotten peace existed. "How long has this been going on?" she asked Vale as they navigated a collapsed transit tunnel. "The uprising? 3 months? The war?" Vale laughed bitterly. "Forever. I've been fighting 17 years. And my father fought 30 before that. His father before him. It's what we do. The Emperor's will." "And you never question it?" Vale's hand drifted to his last pistol. "That's heresy." "That's an answer," Diana said gently. They emerged into a massive chamber that must have served as a water distribution hub. Enormous pipes stretched overhead, and treatment tanks the size of buildings lined the walls. In the center of it all, Captain Oral's forces had established a defensive perimeter around the primary control station, or what was left of them. Bodies littered the ground, both cultists and guardsmen. The survivors numbered perhaps 30, clustered behind improvised barricades, their fire sporadic and disorganized. And walking among them, speaking in a voice that echoed with unnatural resonance, was Captain Orel himself. "Don't you see?" he was saying, gesturing wildly. "Don't you see the truth? The Emperor is dead. He's been rotting on that throne for 10,000 years while we die in his name. We're not serving divinity, we're serving a corpse." Several soldiers wept openly. Others stared at their weapons as if seeing them for the first time. 2 had already turned their laser guns on themselves. Diana didn't hesitate. She threw the lasso of Hestia with perfect precision, the golden cord wrapping around Orel before he could react. The captain's eyes went wide, and his expression shifted from manic conviction to horrified clarity. What am I saying?" Orel gasped. "Emperor, forgive me, there's something in my head. It's showing me things, making me believe. Speak!" Diana commanded. "What do you truly believe?" "Beneath the corruption!" Orel's face twisted in agony. I believe in my duty, in my men, in the oaths I swore. I believe the Emperor gave us purpose, even if I don't understand his plan. I believe..." Tears streamed down his face. "I believe I'm damned now, that I've failed. But I'd rather die loyal than live as a traitor." The psychic pressure Diana hadn't even realized was there suddenly intensified. She felt it like oil sliding across her thoughts, seeking purchase, trying to find doubts to exploit. But her mind had been trained by gods and demons, tested in trials that would shatter mortal psyches. The presence recoiled, confused by the purity it encountered. Then it retreated, withdrawing from Oral and the surrounding soldiers like poison draining from a wound. Diana released the captain, who collapsed to his knees. The other guardsmen stared in shocked silence. The voices stopped, one of them whispered. Diana looked at the golden lasso in her hand, understanding blooming. In a universe built on lies, on false gods and corrupted truths, on faith maintained through ignorance and fear, a weapon that compelled absolute truth was more dangerous than any sword. She'd found her purpose in this dark millennium. Word of the woman who drove back madness with golden light spread through the Imperial Guard ranks faster than a commissar's bullet. By the time Diana returned to Colonel Cassar's command bunker, 3 different regimental commanders had requested her presence, 2 tech priests wanted to examine her equipment, and a commissar had filed a formal inquiry into her existence. The Imperium, Diana was learning, did not appreciate mysteries. Commissar Helena Drask stood in Cassar's command center like an obsidian monument to Imperial authority. Her black greatcoat bore the silver skull and crossbones of the Officio Prefectus, and her augmetic eye whirred softly as it tracked Diana's approach. She'd executed 16 men for cowardice in the last month alone. Her reputation preceded her like a death sentence. Colonel Cassar! Drask's voice carried the clipped precision of someone who'd never spoken a wasted word. You've allowed an unverified combatant to operate within your command structure for 6 hours without proper clearance or ideological verification. Explain. Cassar didn't flinch. She's killed approximately 200 cultists, destroyed 3 chaos spawn, and prevented the psychological collapse of an entire company. That's explanation enough for a war zone, Commissar. No, Drask replied flatly. It isn't. Her augmetic eye fixed on Diana. You claim to serve justice. Define that term in Imperial context. Diana met the Commissar's gaze without hesitation. She'd faced interrogations before, by generals, governments, and once memorably by Batman, who trusted no one on principle. This woman's intensity was formidable, but Diana had been forged by harder judges. Justice is protecting those who cannot protect themselves, Diana said. It's standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. It's refusing to compromise your principles even when compromise seems easier. It's recognizing that every life has value, even when, especially when, the universe tries to convince you otherwise. The Emperor grants value, Drask corrected coldly. Without his will, humanity is nothing. Without faith in his divine purpose, we are lost. Do you have faith in the Emperor? The question hung in the command center like an executioner's blade. Diana understood the trap. Say yes, and she'd be lying. Something her nature abhorred. Say no, and she'd likely face summary execution. Around her, the command staff held their breath. I have faith in humanity, Diana answered carefully. I've seen what humans can achieve when they stand together against darkness. I've watched soldiers, your soldiers, hold the line when retreat would be easier. I've seen them care for their wounded, share rations they don't have enough of, and die protecting strangers. That kind of courage doesn't come from fear or obligation. It comes from something deeper. Whether you call it the Emperor's will or the human spirit, I'll fight to preserve it. Drask's human eye narrowed dangerously. That sounds suspiciously like heresy, dressed in pretty words. Does it matter? Diana challenged. Your colonel said I've killed 200 enemies of humanity today. I've saved Imperial lives, defended Imperial positions, and asked nothing in return. Judge me by my actions if my words trouble you. I judge you by both, Drask replied. Actions without proper faith are meaningless. The road to damnation is paved with good intentions twisted by chaos corruption. She turned to Cassar. I'm recommending immediate detention pending inquisitorial review. This woman is... The Vox system erupted with static. Then a panicked voice cut through. All units, priority Alpha. Massive enemy force detected moving through Sector 9 Delta. Estimated strength 5,000 cultists supported by demon engines. Current trajectory leads directly to the main hab blocks. 3 million civilians in the path. Request immediate. The transmission dissolved into screaming, then cut off entirely. Kasser's face went pale. That's where we evacuated the civilian population 3 days ago. They're packed into those hab blocks like ammunition in a magazine. If the cultists break through... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Diana was already moving toward the door. How far? 12 kilometers, Lieutenant Yana reported. Transit systems are down. Ground transport would take 40 minutes minimum. I can make it in 10, Diana said. Drask stepped into her path, bolt pistol drawn, but not quite aimed. You're not going anywhere without authorization. Diana looked at the weapon, then at the commissar's face, and made a decision. She'd worked with military authority structures before. She understood chains of command, respected them even. But she also understood when protocols became chains that held back necessary action. Commissar Drask, she said softly, I respect what you represent. Order. Structure. The rules that hold civilization together when everything else falls apart. But 3 million people are about to die, and you're worried about paperwork. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to save those civilians. You can shoot me for it afterward if you still think that's necessary, but you're going to have to shoot me in the back, because I'm not stopping. She walked past Drask without waiting for permission. The commissar's bolt pistol tracked her movement, finger tightening on the trigger. The command center held its collective breath. Then, Kassar spoke, his voice carrying quiet authority. Commissar, I'm authorizing her deployment under emergency combat protocols. We can debate theology after we save those civilians. Assuming, he added with bitter humor, any of us survive long enough for that conversation. Drask held position for 3 more heartbeats, her internal conflict visible on her scarred face. Finally, she holstered the pistol. This isn't over. It never is, Diana agreed. Sergeant Vale, can you guide me to Sector 9 Delta? Vale looked to Kasser, received a curt nod, then grabbed his laser gun. 3rd Company, mount up! We're going to save some civilians and probably die heroically. The Emperor protects! The Emperor protects! His men roared back, already moving toward the motor pool. Diana ran alongside them, her longer stride easily matching their pace. As they emerged into the toxic daylight of Tertius Prime, Vale glanced at her sidelong. You know you just made an enemy of the commissariat, right? They don't forget. They don't forgive. I've made enemies of gods, Diana replied. I think I can handle one angry commissar. You don't understand, Vale insisted. The commissariat has authority across the entire Imperium. Planets, systems, fleets. They have jurisdiction everywhere. Cross them, and there's nowhere to hide. Diana smiled grimly. Then I'll make sure I'm too useful to execute. That seems to be the only currency that matters here. Utility. They piled into a Chimera armored transport, the vehicle's engine growling to life with a sound like a dying beast. As the transport lurched forward, Diana noticed something she'd missed before. Small shrines built into every corner of the passenger compartment. Tiny skulls, prayer strips, purity seals. The soldiers touched them unconsciously before checking their weapons. Faith as armor against horror. She understood that. But she also wondered what happened when that armor cracked. when faith couldn't explain the suffering, when prayers went unanswered in the darkness. She'd seen Captain Orell's face when the psychic assault broke through his indoctrination. She'd seen the despair beneath the discipline, the questions these people weren't allowed to ask. The Imperium ran on faith, yes, but it also ran on fear. And Diana was beginning to understand that the two had become indistinguishable. The Chimera raced through abandoned streets, past burning buildings and makeshift barricades. Diana saw Imperial symbols everywhere. Eagles and skulls carved into every surface, devotional texts filling every blank space. It was as if humanity here had to constantly remind itself what it believed, had to surround itself with symbols lest it forget. On ancient Themyscira, they'd had temples and shrines, certainly, but they'd also had gardens and art, beauty that existed for its own sake. Here, everything served the war machine. Everything was subjugated to survival. What kind of humanity survived at the end of such compromise? What remained when you stripped away everything except duty and faith and endless war? Diana was very much afraid she was about to find out. The Vox crackled. "This is forward observation post 7-7. Enemy force is Emperor preserve us. They've got demon engines. I count 4 defilers, maybe a dozen forge fiends. The cultists are using civilians as shields. Repeat, they're herding civilians ahead of the main force. Any defensive fire will cut through innocents first." Vale cursed creatively. "That's new. Usually they just kill the civilians outright." "They're learning," Diana said grimly. "Evil always does." The Chimera rounded a corner and slammed to a halt. Through the forward viewport, Diana saw the horror unfolding. Thousands of cultists advanced down a wide thoroughfare, their corrupted bodies shambling forward in a tide of diseased flesh. And ahead of them, driven by whips and gunfire, ran the civilians, men, women, children, the old and the young, all fleeing in blind terror directly toward the Imperial defensive positions. Behind the cultists, the demon engines stalked. Enormous mechanical monsters fused with warp-touched flesh, their cannons tracking for targets, their claws carving gouges in the rockcrete. They were beautiful and terrible, and wrong on every level Diana could perceive. "We can't fire," Vale said helplessly. "We'd kill more civilians than cultists." "Then we don't fire," Diana replied. She opened the Chimera's rear hatch and stepped out into the open street. "We go meet them." "That's suicide!" Diana drew her sword and settled her shield. "No, that's what heroes do." She advanced toward 5,000 enemies alone, and behind her, after a moment's stunned silence, Sergeant Vale and Third Company followed. Because sometimes, even in the 41st millennium's crushing darkness, courage was contagious. The first demon engine noticed Diana when she crossed into the killing zone, that open stretch of street where its targeting cogitators calculated maximum weapon effectiveness. The Defiler's multiple eyes swiveled toward her with mechanical precision, its warped intelligence processing this new variable. A single human advancing alone while thousands fled. Error. Recalculate. Threat assessment required. It opened fire with its battle cannon. Diana saw the muzzle flash and moved on pure instinct honed over 3 millennia of combat. Her bracers came up in a crossblock as the explosive shells screamed toward her. The impact would have vaporized a normal human. For Diana, it was merely impossible. The shell detonated against her bracers, and the explosion redirected, not absorbed, but deflected. The force channeling outward in a shockwave that shattered windows and cracked rockcrete. Diana skidded backward 3 meters, her boots carving trenches in the ground, but she remained standing. Smoke curled from her bracers. She was entirely unharmed. The fleeing civilians stumbled to a halt, confused by what they'd witnessed. The cultists behind them hesitated, their diseased minds struggling to process the impossible. Even the demon engines paused, their corrupted machine spirits encountering a calculation error they couldn't resolve. Diana used that moment of shocked silence to amplify her voice, projecting it across the battlefield with the command that had once rallied armies against the forces of Ares. "People of this world, stop running! Stand behind me!" Something in her voice, some quality of absolute certainty, of divine authority that transcended the Imperium's grinding indoctrination, cut through the panic. The nearest civilians stopped, then more, then hundreds. They turned to see this woman in strange armor standing between them and certain death, and their survival instincts warred with a desperate, barely remembered hope that someone, somewhere, might actually protect them. "Get behind her!" Sergeant Vale roared, understanding Diana's plan instantly. "Third Company, establish a defensive line. Civilians, move toward the guardsmen. Now!" The civilians ran, but now they ran toward safety instead of blindly forward. They streamed past Diana in a flood of terrified humanity. Factory workers with chemical burns, children clutching makeshift toys, elderly citizens who'd survived 80 years in this hell only to face one more horror. Diana held position as they passed, her shield raised, her presence a living wall between the innocent and the corrupted. The cultists surged forward with howls of rage. The demon engines opened fire with every weapon in their arsenal. The air filled with fire and death. Diana moved like liquid lightning. Her bracers deflected autocannon shells, sending them screaming into the cultists' own ranks. Her shield caught a blast of warp fire that should have immolated everything within 20 meters. The divine aegis absorbed the unholy flames and converted them to harmless light. Her sword found cultists who pressed too close, each strike precise and economical. She didn't waste motion. She didn't grandstand. She simply fought with the perfected skill of someone who'd been doing this since before most of these cultists' civilizations existed. Behind her, the civilians reached Viel's defensive line. The guardsmen pulled them through, establishing a human corridor that funneled the innocent to safety while maintaining firing positions. They couldn't shoot yet. Diana was in their line of fire. But they prepared, fingers on triggers, faith in this strange warrior, the only thing holding their formation together. A forge fiend, a demon engine built around guns and hate, charged Diana directly. 8 tons of corrupted metal and flesh bore down on her with demonic speed. She didn't retreat. Instead, she dropped low, let it pass over her, and drove her sword upward into its belly as it sailed overhead. The blade carved through armor and demon flesh. And the forge fiend crashed behind her in a shower of sparks and ichor. "Still with us in the darkness?" Vale shouted to his men, his voice carrying forced bravado. "Hit that like button if this tale chills your soul. And by the Emperor, if we survive this, I'm buying everyone a drink." Gallows humor, the last refuge of soldiers facing impossible odds. His men laughed despite their terror, and their fear became manageable. Diana vaulted onto the crashed Forge Fiend's chassis, using the elevation to survey the battlefield. More civilians were reaching safety, but the cultist horde was learning. They were spreading out, trying to flank her position. The remaining demon engines were coordinating their fire patterns, and in the rear of their formation, something massive was moving, something that made the defilers look like children's toys. A brass scorpion of corn, 40 meters of demonic war machine, its claws capable of shearing through fortress walls, its guns able to level city blocks. It emerged from behind a collapsed building, and Diana felt her stomach tighten. She'd faced impossible odds before, but this... The Scorpion's weapons locked onto her position. "Last civilians through," Vale reported via Vox. 3,200 accounted for. We're clear. Diana leaped from the Forge Fiend as the Scorpion's Demolisher cannon fired. The shell obliterated the wreckage she'd been standing on and cratered the street. She hit the ground running, sprinting toward Vale's lines as the demon engines pursued with mechanical fury. "Open fire!" Vale roared. Third Company and the supporting units opened up with everything they had. Last fire painted the street in crimson beams. Heavy bolters chewed through cultist formations. A Lascanon team scored a direct hit on a defiler's leg joint, and the demon engine toppled with a shriek that hurt to hear. Diana reached the defensive line and didn't stop. She turned, planted her feet, and raised her shield as the brass Scorpion's next shot screamed toward the Imperial position. The shell hit her shield dead center. The explosion was apocalyptic. The shockwave shattered every remaining window within 100 meters. Guardsmen were thrown from their feet. Even inside their armored transport, Vale's crew felt the Chimera rock on its suspension. When the smoke cleared, Diana still stood. Her armor smoked. Her arms trembled with the strain. But the Imperial line behind her was intact, and the civilians were safe. The brass Scorpion paused, its demon intelligence genuinely confused. Nothing should survive that. Nothing human could absorb that much destructive force. The machine spirit consulted its corrupt programming and reached the only logical conclusion. This wasn't human. Diana felt it then, the demon engine's attention shifting from simple target acquisition to something more focused, more hungry. The chaos corruption within the machine recognized something in her, something that offended it on a fundamental level. Purity. Uncorrupted divinity. The anathema to everything it represented. The Scorpion charged, abandoning ranged combat for the visceral satisfaction of tearing apart this affront to chaos. Its massive claws opened, ready to shear Diana in half. She met its charge with the lasso of Hestia. The golden rope wrapped around the Scorpion's forward claw and went taut. Diana set her stance, every muscle in her divine body straining against the demon engine's momentum. The lasso blazed with light so pure, it hurt to look at directly. The Scorpion's charge halted as if it had hit an invisible wall. Then Diana began to pull. Metals groaned. The demon within the machine howled in confusion and rage. Diana's feet carved trenches in the rockcrete as she hauled on the lasso, leveraging her god-born strength against corrupted technology. Inch by impossible inch, she dragged the 40-meter war machine backward. "What is she?" someone whispered among the guardsmen. "Emperor's champion," Vale replied, because it was the only explanation that made sense in his world view. Has to be. Diana felt the demon inside the Scorpion fighting her, felt its hatred and hunger pressing against her through the lasso's connection. It showed her visions of corruption, of power, of a galaxy conquered and remade in chaos's image. It promised her strength beyond measure if she would only bend her knee to the true gods. She showed it Themyscira in response. She showed it a civilization built on truth and honor. She showed it 3,000 years of choosing justice over power, sacrifice over triumph, compassion over conquest. The demon recoiled, wounded by concepts it couldn't corrupt. Diana released the lasso and charged before the Scorpion could recover. She leaped onto its carapace, drove her sword into its sensor cluster, and twisted. The blade found the demon core, the warp-touched heart that powered the machine. For a moment, woman and demon met directly. Mortal divinity against immortal corruption. Diana's will, forged by gods and tested by wars beyond counting, proved stronger. The demon shattered. The scorpion collapsed, its weapons going silent, its limbs falling limp. Diana rode it down and rolled clear as the massive machine crashed into the street with an impact that registered on seismographs across the hive. The cultist horde, witnessing the death of their greatest weapon, broke. They fled in disarray, their corruption not enough to overcome the primal terror of watching their supposedly unstoppable champion defeated by a single warrior. The guardsmen of Third Company erupted in cheers. They'd watched someone do the impossible, and for just a moment, the grinding horror of the 41st millennium felt survivable. Diana stood amid the wreckage, breathing hard, and looked back at the 3,000 civilians she'd saved. They stared at her with expressions ranging from awe to fear to desperate hope. These people had lived their entire lives under the Emperor's iron certainty. They'd been taught that only through his will could humanity survive. And today, something else had saved them. Commissar Drask's voice crackled over the vox, cold and measured. "Sergeant Vale, take the woman into custody immediately. The Inquisition will want to speak with her." Diana met Vale's eyes. The sergeant's hand hovered near his laspistol. Orders were orders, but his gaze drifted to the 3,000 civilians, his people, still breathing because Diana had stood alone against impossible odds. "Vox is malfunctioning, Commissar," Vale said flatly. "Repeat your last transmission?" Static answered him. Drask wasn't buying it, but in the aftermath of the battle, with civilians streaming to safety and demon engines still burning, even a commissar had to prioritize. "You just committed insubordination," Diana observed quietly. Vale shrugged. "Welcome to the 41st millennium. We're all damned anyway. Might as well be damned for something worthwhile." The brass scorpion's death sent ripples through the chaos forces besieging Tertius Prime. Within 4 hours, cultist attacks across the northern sectors decreased by 30%. Within 8 hours, 3 separate Chaos warbands turned on each other in disputes over who bore responsibility for the failure. Within 12 hours, Colonel Kasser received intelligence that the enemy leadership was fracturing. Diana spent those 12 hours learning what the Imperial Guard called standard procedure. It started with decontamination, a chemical shower so caustic it would have burned normal skin, administered by servo skulls that scanned for corruption with unsettling thoroughness. Then came medical examination by a chirurgeon who looked at Diana's complete absence of scars, radiation damage, or organ degradation with deep suspicion. Then cataloging of equipment by tech priests who measured, analyzed, and ultimately classified her gear as xenotech of uncertain origin. Recommend further study. Through it all, Diana answered questions with patient honesty, even though she could see how each truthful answer made her interrogators more nervous. No, she'd never heard of the Emperor. Yes, she'd fought gods before. No, she didn't require prayers or devotions. Yes, she would continue helping humanity regardless of their acceptance. The truth, she was learning, was often more dangerous than lies in the Imperium. Now she sat in a sealed conference room deep within the command bunker, across from 3 men who would decide her immediate fate. Colonel Kasser, representing military authority, Commissar Drask, representing ideological purity, and a new face, Magos Explorator Kane, a tech priest whose body had been so extensively modified that only his brain case and one eye remained obviously human. "Your equipment defies conventional analysis," Kane said, his voice synthesized through Vox speakers embedded in his throat. "The metallurgical composition of your bracers shows an alloy structure that predates the dark age of technology." The rope generates a field that our most sensitive instruments cannot properly measure. And your sword..." He paused, his remaining eye blinking rapidly. "Your sword contains no power cell, no molecular disruption field, no monomolecular edge, yet it cuts through ceramite as if passing through water. Explain." "They were forged by gods," Diana said simply. "Hephaestus crafted the bracers from the remains of Zeus's aegis. The lasso was woven from the golden girdle of Gaia. The sword was a gift from..." "Myth," Drask interrupted. "Ancient Terran mythology repurposed to explain xenotech or warpcraft. The Emperor alone possesses divine authority. These items are either heretical or xenos in origin. Or," Kasser interjected carefully, "there's something we don't understand. Not everything falls into neat categories." "Commissar." "Everything falls into neat categories," Drask countered. "Loyal or traitor, human or xenos, pure or corrupt. The Imperium functions because we maintain these distinctions. Blur them, and we invite catastrophe." Diana had been watching this dance for hours. Kassar trying to preserve a useful asset. Drask determined to maintain ideological purity. Kane fascinated by incomprehensible technology. It reminded her of JLA meetings where Batman argued with Superman while Cyborg tried to keep the peace. Different faces, same human dynamics. "Let me simplify this," Diana said. "I've killed approximately 400 enemies of humanity in the last day. I've saved over 3,000 civilians. I've asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to continue helping. So here's my offer. Judge me by my actions. I'll fight beside your soldiers, follow your military chain of command in tactical matters, and prove through deeds that I'm an ally. If at any point I demonstrate corruption or hostile intent, shoot me. Your weapons may not kill me, but I'll respect the attempt." "That's not how this works," Drask began. "That's exactly how this works," Kasser interrupted, his patience finally breaking. "Commissar, with all due respect, we're losing this war. Before she arrived, I gave us 2 weeks before the cultists overran our positions. Now we have hope. Real, tangible hope that we might actually hold long enough for reinforcement." He leaned forward. "I don't care if she worships ancient Terran deities, the Emperor, or a particularly enlightened rock. She fights for humanity. And that's enough." "It's not enough for the Inquisition," Drask replied coldly. "I've already sent word. Inquisitor Covenant is en route from the Secundus system. He'll be here within 3 days. Until then, she remains under constant observation." Diana nodded. "Acceptable. I'll continue operating with your forces. The observation won't hinder me." "You misunderstand," Drask said. "The observation isn't for your protection. It's for ours. Step out of line once, and I'll execute you personally. Emperor's mercy be damned." Diana met the Commissar's augmetic stare. "Commissar Drask, I've been threatened by gods, demons, and dictators. Your conviction is admirable, but threats don't move me. If you genuinely believe I'm a danger to humanity, then do your duty. If not, then let's stop wasting time and focus on the real enemy." The room fell silent. Finally, Magos Kane's mechanical laughter broke the tension, a sound like grinding gears attempting humor. "I approve of her efficiency," the tech priest said. "Conflict resolution through direct challenge. Very logical." His eye focused on Diana. "I have a proposal. My forge teams have been attempting to repair a Lehman Russ battle tank damaged by warp corruption. The machine spirit has become problematic. If your lasso truly compels truth, Perhaps it could compel truth from the machine spirit as well. Help us restore the tank, and I'll support continued collaboration." Diana considered. She'd never tried using the lasso on a machine before, but if these people viewed their technology as possessing something like a soul... "I'll try," she agreed. 2 hours later, Diana stood in a cavernous repair bay that smelled of sacred oils and ozone. The Lehman Russ tank hulked in the center like a wounded beast. 60 tons of armor and guns scarred by battle and whatever the Chaos forces had done to it. Tech priests swarmed over its hull, chanting prayers and burning incense while servo skulls performed diagnostics. "The corruption occurred 3 days ago," Kane explained. "The crew reported hearing voices through the Vox system. Then the targeting systems began firing randomly, killing 2 of our own. We've replaced every physical component, performed 17 purification rituals, and the machine spirit remains hostile. It's as if something broke inside that we cannot reach with conventional tools." Diana approached the tank slowly, one hand resting on the lasso of Hestia. She could feel something emanating from the armored hull, not quite alive, but not quite dead either. A presence, angry, confused, wounded. "Your machine spirits," she said. "They're real? Actual consciousness within the machines?" "The Omnicia grants awareness to all technology," Kane replied. "Some more than others. War machines that have served faithfully for centuries develop personality. This Lehman Russ is 200 years old. It has a name, Iron Testament. It has served in 17 campaigns, and now something has hurt it in ways we cannot heal." Diana placed her hand on the tank's armored hull and felt the presence recoil. She unwound the lasso of Hestia and wrapped it around the main gun barrel. The golden rope blazed with light, and somewhere inside the machine, something screamed, not with sound, with radio waves, with electrical discharge, with every method of communication the tank possessed. The tech priests stumbled back, their augmetics overloading from the burst of unfiltered signal. Diana held firm, her will pressing through the lasso into whatever counted as the machine's consciousness. "What hurts you?" she asked, not with words, but with intent transmitted through the lasso's connection. The response came as images. Corrupted code that had wormed into the tank's systems during the Chaos assault. Not physical damage, but conceptual damage. Lies written into the machine's core programming. Instructions that contradicted its purpose, made it doubt its function, turned its weapons against those it was meant to protect. Diana understood. She'd seen similar corruption in people. Doubts planted by enemies, fears exploited until they paralyzed. The solution was the same. Replace lies with truth. "You are Iron Testament," she projected through the lasso. "You have served faithfully for 2 centuries. You have protected the innocent and destroyed the enemy. That is your truth. That is your purpose. The voices lied. The corruption lied. But your actions, your history, your service, that was real." The machine's presence thrashed against her, caught between the corrupted programming and the truth she offered. Diana held steady, pouring certainty through the lasso. She showed the machine its own service record. Battles won, soldiers protected, enemies destroyed. She reflected back its purpose until the corrupted code couldn't compete with the weight of 200 years of loyal service. Something inside the tank clicked, not mechanically, but spiritually. The hostile presence calmed, recognized itself, and settled back into its proper function. Diana released the lasso. The golden rope faded to its normal glow. The tech priests stared in shock at their readouts. "Impossible," one whispered. "The machine spirit's aggression index dropped to 0. targeting protocols re-engaged with baseline parameters. It's as if the corruption never happened. Kane approached the tank reverently, placing both hands on its hull. Iron Testament? Can you hear me? The tank's engine rumbled to life, a smooth, healthy sound without the grinding discord that had plagued it for days. The turret rotated left, then right, testing its systems. The main gun elevated and depressed in perfect mechanical harmony. By the Omnissiah, Kane breathed. You healed its spirit. I reminded it of the truth, Diana corrected. The corruption made it forget who it was. The lasso helped it remember. Word of the healed Leman Russ spread even faster than news of the brass scorpion's death. Within hours, tech priests from across the regiment came to the repair bay, bringing damaged equipment and corrupted machine spirits. Diana worked through the night, using the lasso to purge corruption from artillery pieces, Vox systems, even the sacred servo skulls that had begun showing signs of malfunction. She didn't heal all of them. Some corruption ran too deep, had integrated too thoroughly into the machine's core. Those she identified for complete dismantling, but she saved more than half, and each success earned grudging respect from the Mechanicus representatives. By dawn, Magos Kane issued a formal declaration. The woman Diana possesses technological insight beyond current Imperial comprehension. Recommend continued cooperation pending inquisitorial review. Commissar Drask watched from the repair bay entrance, her expression unreadable. Finally, she approached Diana directly. You're making yourself indispensable, the Commissar observed. Clever. The more people depend on you, the harder I'll find it to execute you when the Inquisition demands it. I'm not being clever, Diana replied, exhausted. I'm being useful. There's a difference. Is there? Drask studied her. In my experience, everyone wants something. Power, recognition, survival. What do you want? Diana looked at the repaired tank, at the tech priests chanting prayers of gratitude, at the soldiers sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks because their equipment no longer threatened to turn on them. To go home, she said honestly. But until I find a way, I'll make myself useful here. It's what heroes do. The Imperium doesn't have heroes, Drask said. We have martyrs. I wonder which you'll become. The Orc. Wah hit Tertius Prime like a green avalanche of violence and enthusiasm. They came from the planet's eastern wastelands, a massive horde of greenskins that had been building strength in the irradiated barrens, while the Imperium focused on the chaos uprising. 300,000 orcs, led by a war boss named Skullcrusha Mechbreka, who stood 15 feet tall and wore armor welded from the remains of Imperial tanks. They brought crude but effective vehicles, enormous walkers bristling with guns, and an enthusiasm for violence that transcended species barriers. The orcs didn't care about chaos or the Imperium. They just wanted a good fight, and Tertius Prime promised that in abundance. Diana first learned about the orcs when Colonel Kasser's command bunker erupted into barely controlled chaos. Officers shouted over Vox channels, tactical displays lit up with hostile contacts, and someone actually used the phrase, "It's raining greenskins," without apparent irony. Wah! Detected emerging from Sector 12 Theta, Lieutenant Yana reported, her voice climbing an octave. Contact strength estimated 300,000 and growing. Multiple mobile fortresses, walker formations, and Emperor preserve us! They're driving wrecked vehicles into our defensive positions as improvised battering rams. Kasser's face went pale. Fighting a chaos uprising with depleted forces was suicidal enough. Adding an orc Wa to the equation was mathematically impossible. How? He demanded. How did we miss a force this size? They were hiding in the radiation zones, Magos Kane reported from his station. Our auspex couldn't penetrate the interference. They must have been building strength for months, waiting for us to weaken ourselves against the cultists before striking. Diana studied the tactical display, watching the green tide roll toward Imperial positions. These orcs, they're the same creatures that attacked human worlds in the reports I've read? The green-skin menace, Drask confirmed grimly. Xenos filth that lives only to fight. They're brutal, numerous, and too stupid to negotiate with. We purge them wherever we find them. But they're attacking the Chaos cultists too, Diana observed, pointing to areas where green markers collided with the red markers representing corrupted forces. Look, they're not coordinating. They're just fighting everything they encounter. They fight everyone, Vale said, having been summoned to the command bunker along with his company. Orcs don't make alliances. They make enemies, then they fight them. It's all they know. Diana watched the display, an idea forming. Then we use that. The enemy of my enemy isn't always my friend, but they can still be useful. If the orcs and chaos forces engage each other, both sides weaken. We conserve our forces, let them bleed each other, then strike whoever remains. That's... Kasser paused, recalculating. That's actually sound tactical doctrine. The problem is controlling where the engagement happens. We'd need to funnel both forces into a contained area. I can do that, Diana said. Give me a squad and authorization to operate independently. I'll draw the orcs toward the heaviest chaos concentrations in Sector 8. The cultists have been fortifying that area for weeks. Put two violent forces in one space and let nature take its course. Commissar Drask stepped forward. You're proposing to deliberately provoke a Xenos horde that violates approximately 17 Imperial directives regarding survival, Diana interrupted. It violates 17 directives, but ensures we survive the next 72 hours. Which matters more? The room fell silent. Finally, Kasser spoke. Sergeant Vale, attach yourself to Diana. Observe and assist. If this works, document everything for the tactical archives. If it fails... He didn't finish. They all knew what failure meant. The Emperor protects, Vale said without enthusiasm. Let's hope so, Diana replied, because I'm not sure he's paying attention. An hour later, Diana stood on a highway overpass with Vale's squad, watching the orc vanguard approach. Even from a distance, the greenskins were impressive. Huge creatures with green skin, enormous muscles, and an attitude that radiated pure, uncomplicated joy in violence. They wore scrap armor welded together with apparent disregard for aesthetics or protection value. Their weapons looked cobbled together from junk, yet Diana's tactical experience recognized functional, if brutal, design. All right, she said. I need to get their attention and lead them towards Sector 8. Suggestions? Shoot at them, Vael offered. Orcs respect violence. Show them a good fight. They'll follow you anywhere. Kill their knob, Private Corvus added, pointing to an especially large orc leading the formation. The knob, that's their squad leader. Kill him, and the others will want revenge. Diana considered both options. She dealt with warrior cultures before. The key was speaking their language. And for orcs, violence apparently was the language. She stepped to the edge of the overpass, clearly visible, and threw her shield like a discus. The shield spun through the air with perfect precision, struck the leading knob directly in the face with enough force to decapitate him, then ricocheted back to Diana's arm. The knob's body collapsed. The other orcs stopped, staring at the display of casual violence. Then they roared with delight. Wah! The cry went up from 100 throats. "De shiny Hume got crump! Proper fight!" The entire formation turned toward Diana's position and charged with enthusiastic bloodlust. "They seem happy about this," Vael observed nervously. "They're warriors," Diana said, already running toward Sector 8. "They respect strength. I just showed them strength. Now they want to test themselves against it." She leaped from the overpass, dropping 20 meters to land in a perfect three-point stance that cracked the rockcrete. Behind her, Vael's squad used grappling lines to descend more cautiously. The orcs, seeing the dramatic leap, roared again and accelerated their pursuit. Diana led them on a winding chase through the hive infrastructure. She moved fast enough to stay ahead, but slow enough to keep them engaged, jumping between buildings, vaulting over obstacles, occasionally turning to deflect a few shots from their crude guns before continuing the pursuit. The orcs followed with growing enthusiasm, more joining the chase as word spread of "Da shiny Hume what jumps real good." Vael's squad panted behind her, struggling to keep pace. "How are you not tired?" Vael gasped. "Divine endurance," Diana replied without slowing. "Gift from the gods. Very useful." "Must be nice," Corvus wheezed. Diana led the growing orc horde, now numbering several thousand, directly towards Sector 8's primary chaos stronghold. The cultists had fortified an old manufactory complex, turning it into a twisted temple to the dark gods. Demonic symbols covered every surface, and screams echoed from within as they performed whatever rituals kept their corruption fed. Diana stopped at the stronghold's main entrance and turned to face the approaching orcs. Thousands of greenskins bore down on her position, their crude weapons raised, their voices joined in a thunderous "Wag!" She waited until they were 50 meters away, then threw her voice with divine projection. "The real fight is in there! The spiky gits inside are tougher than me!" The orcs skidded to a confused halt. One particularly scarred orc, a boss from his elaborate armor, bellowed, "You saying we should fight them instead?" "I'm saying they're better fighters than you are!" Diana shouted back. The orc boss's face went through several emotions: confusion, anger, then offended pride. "No one's a better fighter, Dan orcs! We'll show ya! Boys, crump the spiky gits! Show to Hume who's proper killy!" The orcs surged past Diana toward the cultist stronghold. The defenders, expecting an Imperial assault, suddenly found themselves facing a green tide of violence. Gunfire erupted. Orcs crashed through defensive positions with joyous abandon. Cultists fought back with diseased weapons and dark sorcery. Diana and Vael's squad pulled back to a safe observation distance and watched the carnage unfold. That was... Vael searched for words. That was brilliant. And insane. Brilliantly insane? It was necessary, Diana corrected. Now both sides weaken each other, and we preserve our forces for when it matters. They watched for 3 hours as orcs and chaos cultists tore each other apart with enthusiastic brutality. The orcs' simple joy in violence proved surprisingly effective against chaos corruption. They were too straightforward to be tempted by demonic promises, too enthusiastic about fighting to care about the psychological warfare the cultists employed. When a greater demon materialized in the stronghold's center, a towering horror of tentacles and mouths, the orcs didn't flee in terror. They cheered and charged it with even greater enthusiasm. "The big one showed up! Now it's a proper fight!" Diana found herself grudgingly impressed. The orcs were brutal, crude, and absolutely committed to violence as a lifestyle choice. But there was something almost pure about their approach. No corruption, no hidden agendas, just honest desire to fight strong opponents. By the time the battle concluded, both forces were decimated. The Chaos Stronghold lay in ruins, its defenders dead or scattered. The orcs had suffered heavy casualties, but seemed entirely satisfied with the exchange. The survivors wandered off looking for new fights, their bloodlust temporarily sated. Vale reported back to Cassar. Sector 8 stronghold destroyed. Estimated casualties, 4,000 orcs, 6,000 cultists. Imperial losses, 0. Diana's tactic worked perfectly. In the command bunker, Commissar Drask listened to the report with visible internal conflict. She deliberately provoked Xenos to attack human positions. She provoked Xenos to attack corrupted human positions, Cassar corrected. There's a distinction, and it saved us weeks of bloody fighting. Diana returned to the command bunker to find herself regarded with new respect and new wariness. She demonstrated not just combat prowess, but tactical acumen. She'd thought like a commander, not just a warrior. That made her more valuable. And in the 41st millennium, nothing was more dangerous than being valuable. Magos Explorator Kane's workshop occupied 3 levels of the command bunker's substructure. A labyrinth of sacred machinery and arcane technology that hummed with barely contained power. Diana stood in its center, surrounded by tech priests who circled her equipment like priests examining holy relics, which, from their perspective, might not be far from the truth. Her bracers rested on an analysis table, glowing faintly under the scrutiny of a dozen different scanning devices. The lasso of Hestia coiled nearby, its golden light casting strange shadows across the workshop's Gothic architecture. Only her sword remained with her. She'd politely but firmly refused to surrender it, and something in her tone had convinced even Kane not to press the issue. "Fascinating," Kane murmured, his remaining organic eye blinking rapidly as he studied the readouts. "The bracer's atomic structure exists in a state of quantum flux I cannot adequately describe. They appear to be simultaneously solid matter and something else, pure concept made manifest perhaps. And the energy signature..." He paused, his mechanical components whirring. "It matches nothing in our databases. Not promethium, not plasma, not even warp-based power. It's as if they draw energy from a source outside conventional reality." "They were forged by a god," Diana reminded him. "Divine craftsmanship tends to defy mortal analysis." "There are no gods but the Emperor," a junior tech priest interjected automatically, then wilted under Kane's glare. "Theological debates aside," Kane continued, "these items represent technology, or something approximating technology, that predates even the Dark Age. If we could understand their construction principles, replicate even a fraction of their capabilities..." His voice took on a reverent tone. "It would revolutionize Imperial armament doctrine." Diana watched the tech priests work with growing unease. She'd encountered scientists before: Star Labs, Wayne Enterprises, the Fortress of Solitude, and she recognized the look. The hunger to understand, to replicate, to weaponize. It was a universal constant across dimensions. "You can't replicate them," she said gently. "They're not just advanced technology. They're divine artifacts. The materials don't exist in your universe, and the craftsmanship requires literal gods. Everything can be replicated given sufficient understanding, Cain replied. The Omnissiah teaches that all technology is knowable. All machines can be understood. We simply lack the proper framework. Some things are meant to remain unique, Diana insisted. These were gifts, not blueprints. Before Cain could respond, alarms shrieked through the workshop. Red light flooded the space as proximity sensors detected incoming threats. A tech priest at the security station called out, "Hostiles breaching the eastern perimeter. Multiple contacts, moving with supernatural speed." Diana grabbed her sword and ran for the exit, her bracers forgotten on the analysis table. She reached the corridor to find guardsmen establishing defensive positions, their laser guns trained on shadows that moved wrong. Too fast, too fluid, accompanied by a smell like sulfur and rotting flowers. Chaos cultists had infiltrated the command bunker. But these weren't the shambling, diseased wretches Diana had fought before. These moved with predatory grace, their mutations sophisticated rather than grotesque. Enhanced muscles, blade-like bone protrusions, eyes that glowed with warp light. They'd been transformed into living weapons by whatever dark power they served. And leading them was something that made Diana's combat instincts scream warnings. It stood 7 feet tall in Baroque armor that seemed to be part metal, part flesh, constantly shifting between states. A horned helm hid its face, and when it spoke, its voice resonated with layers of sound that hurt to hear. "At last," the Demon Prince said. "I've found you, little godling. Did you think you could bring your purity into my domain without consequence?" Diana raised her sword, recognizing the true threat immediately. This wasn't just another cultist leader. This was something that had transcended mortality, touched the warp, and emerged as something between demon and mortal. A champion of chaos who'd earned dark apotheosis. "I don't know you," she said, buying time as guardsmen positioned themselves. "But I know what you are. Corruption given form." "I am Kharothos the Enlightened," the Demon Prince replied, his voice dripping with mockery. "And I am your death. You radiate truth in a universe built on necessary lies. Carry uncorrupted divinity in a galaxy where gods are made of screaming souls. You're an infection, Amazon. A disease that threatens the natural order of this reality." "Good," Diana said simply, and attacked. She moved faster than the guardsman could track, her blade singing through the air as she closed the distance. Kharothos met her charge with a sword that wept blood and reality distortion. Their weapons clashed with a sound like breaking glass, and Diana felt the impact reverberate through her divine bones. He was strong. Stronger than the spawn. Stronger than the demon engines. Empowered by the warp itself, drawing on energies that made her divine strength seem almost quaint. Diana gave ground, her blade working in defensive patterns as Kharothos pressed his advantage. His cultists surged forward to support their master, but the guardsmen opened fire, laser guns burning through enhanced flesh. The cultists were deadly, but they were still mortal. The soldiers held. "You cannot defeat me," Kharothos taunted, his blade carving reality itself as he struck. "I have transcended flesh, embraced powers your primitive gods never imagined. I am beyond death, beyond defeat." Diana blocked, parried, analyzed his fighting style. He was powerful, yes, fast and skilled, but he was also arrogant, certain of his superiority. And arrogance created openings. She feinted high, dropped low, and drove her blade into the joint where his armor plates met. divine steel carved through demon-touched metal and the flesh beneath. Kharothos roared, in pain and surprise. "You can bleed," Diana observed. "Then you can die." Kharothos' response was to unleash the warp. Reality shattered around him as he called on his patron's power. The corridor twisted, walls becoming fluid, floor tilting at impossible angles. The guardsmen cried out as their senses rebelled against the wrongness. Even Diana felt her balance waver as space itself rejected natural law. But she'd fought in places where reality was optional. She'd battled Ares in dimensions where thought became substance, dueled gods who could reshape worlds with a gesture. The warp was powerful, but it wasn't unique. She centered herself, trusted her training, and moved through the distorted space with practiced grace. Her blade found Kharothos twice more, once across his chest, once along his sword arm. Each strike burned him with divine fire. Each wound wept ichor that steamed on contact with the air. "Impossible!" Kharothos snarled. "You're mortal! You shouldn't be able to resist." "I'm not mortal," Diana corrected, driving her blade toward his heart. "I'm the daughter of Zeus, born of gods, trained by warriors, tempered by 3,000 years of combat. Your power is chaos, but I am order. Your strength is corruption, but I am purity. We're natural enemies, demon, and I've killed gods before." Her blade pierced his armor, found the flesh beneath, and Kharothos screamed, a sound that shattered windows throughout the bunker and sent cultists fleeing in primal terror. He backhanded Diana with desperate strength, sending her crashing through a wall. But the damage was done. Divine steel had tasted Demon Prince blood, and the wound wouldn't heal. Kharothos fled, his remaining cultists covering his retreat with suicidal courage. Diana pursued, but the Demon Prince called on the warp one final time, tearing a rift in reality that swallowed him and his surviving followers. The rift sealed with a thunderclap that left the corridor filled with the stench of burning ozone. Diana stood amid the wreckage, breathing hard. The guardsmen emerged from their defensive positions, staring at her with expressions mixing awe and fear. "You wounded a demon prince," Sergeant Vale said quietly. "I've seen Space Marines die trying to accomplish that." "He'll be back," Diana replied, sheathing her sword. "Creatures like that don't give up easily, and now I've made it personal." In the workshop, Magos Kane had witnessed everything through security feeds. He looked at Diana's bracers still sitting on his analysis table, then at the readings showing the divine energy that had manifested during her fight with Kharothos. "Fascinating," he murmured. "She's not using technology at all. She is technology. Or perhaps..." He paused, his mechanical mind racing through calculations. "Perhaps she represents what technology becomes when it transcends mechanism and achieves true divinity, the ultimate expression of the Omnissiah's will." Commissar Drask had also watched the fight. She stood in the command center, her expression unreadable. "Sir," Lieutenant Yana said carefully, "the woman just drove off a demon prince in single combat. That should be impossible for anything except a living saint." Drask finished quietly. "The Emperor's chosen champions, granted divine power to fight his wars." She turned to Kassar. "What if that's what she is? What if she's a saint we don't recognize because she comes from before the Imperium existed? Before Terra fell and the Emperor rose?" Kassar considered the possibility. "If she is a saint, that explains the power, the incorruptibility, the ability to inspire troops, but it doesn't explain why she doesn't know the Emperor." "Maybe she's from so far back that the Emperor hasn't revealed himself yet," Yana suggested. ancient terror before unity, before the age of strife. They were grasping for explanations that fit their worldview, Diana realized, as she returned to the command center and heard the tail end of this conversation. They couldn't accept that she was simply from another universe. That concept was too alien, too threatening to their understanding of reality. So they recontextualized her as something familiar, a saint, an ancient warrior, anything that fit within the Imperium's theological framework. Diana let them believe it. Sometimes, she'd learned, truth needed to wear comfortable lies to be accepted. But in 3 days, the Inquisitor would arrive. And Inquisitors, she suspected, were considerably harder to fool. The Inquisitor arrived ahead of schedule, which Colonel Kasser took as a particularly bad omen. Inquisitor Matthias Covenant descended from his shuttle like judgment incarnate. A tall, gaunt man wrapped in crimson robes lined with purity seals, his face scarred by acid burns that twisted the left side into a permanent scowl. His retinue followed with military precision. A pair of crusaders in ornate power armor, a psyker with dead white eyes and trembling hands, and an interrogator carrying a data slate that presumably contained every heresy Covenant had ever purged. Diana watched from the command bunker's observation deck as the Inquisitor's procession crossed the landing pad. She'd researched the Inquisition as best she could from Imperial records. Humanity's secret police granted absolute authority to root out corruption, heresy, and alien influence by any means necessary. They answered to no one except each other and the Emperor himself. They were also empowered to execute entire planetary populations if they deemed it necessary. "You should be nervous," Commissar Drask said, appearing beside Diana with her usual silent efficiency. "Inquisitors don't visit war zones unless something catches their attention. You caught his attention." "I've been interrogated before," Diana replied calmly. "By people with considerably more power than your Inquisitor." "Have you been interrogated by people who can legally execute you? Everyone who's ever spoken to you, and everyone who might speak about you in the future just to be thorough?" Drask's tone carried dark amusement. "Because that's what Inquisitors do when they suspect corruption." Diana turned to face the Commissar directly. "Then I'll answer his questions truthfully and hope that honesty is enough. It's all I can do." "In the Imperium," Drask said quietly, "honesty is often the most dangerous choice you can make." The interrogation began an hour later in a sealed chamber deep within the command bunker. Diana sat across from Inquisitor Covenant at a bare metal table, her weapons confiscated but her posture relaxed. The Inquisitor's psyker stood in the corner, eyes closed, reading the psychic currents around Diana with visible strain. The Crusaders flanked the door, silent and imposing. Covenant studied Diana with eyes that had witnessed horrors beyond counting. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the rasp of someone who'd breathed too much toxic atmosphere. "You are an anomaly," he stated flatly. Anomalies in the Imperium typically herald corruption, invasion, or worse. Yet reports indicate you've killed chaos forces with impressive efficiency, healed corrupted machine spirits, and even wounded a Daemon Prince. Explain yourself. "I'm a warrior from another place," Diana replied with careful honesty. "I came here by accident and have been helping Imperial forces while searching for a way home." "Another place." Covenant's tone suggested he found that explanation insufficient. "Be specific." "Another dimension. Another reality. My world exists parallel to yours but separate. Different history, different rules, different gods." The psyker in the corner gasped. Covenant raised one scarred hand, and the psyker fell silent, though his trembling intensified. "You claim to be from beyond the materium," Covenant said. That suggests warp origin. Yet you display no mutations, no obvious corruption, and my psyker assures me your soul burns with purity that physically pains him to observe. He leaned forward. Explain this contradiction. I'm not from your warp, Diana insisted. I'm from a completely different reality that doesn't connect to your immaterium at all. Think of it as parallel universes, each with their own rules and inhabitants. Heretical theory, Covenant replied automatically. The materium and immaterium are the totality of existence. Nothing exists beyond them. I'm sitting in front of you, Diana pointed out. I exist. Therefore, your theory is incomplete. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Covenant spoke again. Show me your rope. The one that compels truth. Diana hesitated. The lasso of Hestia was her most powerful tool here, not for combat, but for cutting through the Imperium's layers of deception and dogma. Giving it to an Inquisitor seemed dangerous, but refusing would be worse. She produced the lasso and placed it on the table. Covenant picked it up with surprising reverence, his scarred fingers running along the golden cord. Bind me, he ordered. Are you certain? The lasso compels absolute truth. You'll speak thoughts you might prefer to keep private. I am an Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus, Covenant replied. I have no private thoughts I fear revealing. My faith is absolute. Bind me. Diana wrapped the lasso around Covenant's wrist. The golden light intensified, and the Inquisitor's eyes went wide as the compulsion took hold. What is your purpose here? Diana asked. Covenant's mouth opened, and words emerged in a voice strained by the effort of complete honesty. I came to determine if you are saint, heretic, or Xenos infiltrator. I came to judge whether you represent hope for humanity or another threat to be purged. I came... He paused, struggling. I came because I am tired of purging the innocent alongside the guilty, and I hoped you might be different. I hoped you might be proof that the Emperor still sends us champions worth believing in. The admission hung in the air like a confession. The psyker made a strangled sound. The Crusaders shifted uncomfortably. Even Diana felt the weight of what Covenant had revealed. The doubt, the exhaustion, the desperate hope wrapped in cynicism. She removed the lasso. Covenant slumped, breathing hard. You made me speak my secret shame, he said quietly. I've served the Imperium for 43 years. I've purged 17 worlds, executed thousands, ordered the deaths of millions more. And I no longer know if I'm preserving humanity or destroying it piece by piece. He looked up at Diana. Now you know my weakness. I could have you executed for that knowledge alone. You could, Diana agreed, but you won't. Because you're right. I am different. I'm not a saint, not by your definition, but I am someone who fights for humanity without requiring them to abandon their humanity first. I protect without demanding worship. I speak truth without executing those who doubt. That makes you dangerous, Covenant observed. More dangerous than any heretic, because you offer an alternative to the Imperium's way. You suggest that humanity might survive without endless war, without total faith, without sacrificing everything to the Emperor's will. Is that so terrible? Diana asked. To hope for something better? In the 41st millennium? Covenant laughed bitterly. Hope is the first step toward corruption. Hope makes people question. Questions lead to doubt. Doubt opens doors for chaos. He stood, straightening his robes. And yet, I find myself unable to condemn you. Your actions speak louder than your heretical words. You've saved Imperial lives, destroyed Imperial enemies, and displayed incorruptibility that should be impossible. He turned to his retinue. Stand down. She is not to be detained or executed. To Diana, you may continue operating with Imperial forces, but know this, I will be watching. One sign of corruption, one hint of deception, and I will burn you and everyone you've touched. Am I clear? Perfectly, Diana replied. Covenant moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. The Demon Prince you wounded, Kharothos the Enlightened, has issued a formal challenge across all Vox frequencies. He names you specifically. He's gathering his forces for a final assault on this position. And he's declared that he will personally corrupt or destroy you. The Inquisitor's scared face twisted into something approximating respect. He fears you. In 43 years of service, I've never seen a demon prince afraid. Whatever you are, Diana of Themyscira, you represent something the dark gods cannot comprehend or control. That must terrify them, Diana said. Yes, Covenant agreed. Which makes you the most valuable weapon humanity has encountered in millennia, or the most dangerous threat. Time will tell which. After the Inquisitor left, Diana remained in the interrogation chamber, processing the encounter. She'd been judged by gods and found wanting. She'd been tested by heroes and proven worthy. But she'd never been evaluated with such cold pragmatism, valued purely for her utility as a weapon. The door opened again. Sergeant Vale entered, his expression grim. The Demon Prince's challenge is spreading panic through the ranks, he reported. Half the men think you're a living saint sent to save us. The other half think you're bait that's drawn a greater threat down on our heads. Colonel Kassar requests your presence in the command center. Diana followed Vale through corridors, buzzing with nervous energy. Guardsmen whispered as she passed, some making the sign of the Aquila in reverence, others checking their weapons with suspicious glares. She'd become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. In the command center, Kassar stood before a tactical display showing enemy movements. The Chaos forces were consolidating, pulling back from scattered positions to form a massive army around Kharothos' location. He's not hiding anymore, Kassar explained. The Demon Prince is gathering everything. Cultists, demon engines, corrupted guard units, even forcing the Chaos warbands to cooperate. Our intelligence estimates 50,000 hostiles, all converging on this position. How long do we have? Diana asked. 48 hours before they're in position to attack. Maybe 72 if we're lucky. Kassar met her eyes. We have 15,000 functional soldiers, limited ammunition, and defensive positions that weren't designed to withstand this level of assault. Mathematically, we cannot win. Then we change the math, Diana said. The orcs are still in the area, yes? Still looking for fights? Kassar blinked. You want to provoke them again? I want to turn this into a three-way battle where our enemies destroy each other while we hold the center. The Demon Prince wants me? Fine. Let him come. But he'll have to fight through orcs and his own overextended supply lines to reach me. Magos Kane's mechanical voice crackled over the vox. The woman's tactical analysis is sound. A three-way engagement reduces our direct combat requirements by approximately 47%. Recommend implementation. It's insane, Drask observed, but there was grudging admiration in her tone. But so is everything else about this situation. I say we let the Xenos and heretics kill each other. Kassar looked around the command center, at his exhausted staff, his depleted forces, his impossible situation. Then he looked at Diana, this impossible woman who'd appeared from nowhere and refused to accept defeat. "Make it happen," he ordered. "We've got 48 hours to orchestrate the most complicated battle of my career." "Emperor, help us all." "And if he doesn't," Diana added quietly, "we'll save ourselves." The next 48 hours transformed Tertius Prime's northern sectors into a carefully orchestrated death trap. Diana worked alongside Imperial tacticians, combining her 3,000 years of strategic experience with their intimate knowledge of the local terrain. The plan was audacious, borderline suicidal, and absolutely necessary. "The orcs are the key," Diana explained, moving markers across the tactical hololith. "They're currently scattered across sectors 9 through 14, fighting isolated skirmishes. We need to consolidate them into a single massive force and aim them directly at Kharothos' army." "And how?" Commissar Drask asked with heavy skepticism. "Do you propose to control a Xenos horde?" "I don't control them. I guide them." Diana traced a path on the display. "Orcs follow the biggest fights and the strongest leaders. We create a series of escalating engagements, leading from their current position toward the chaos concentration. Each fight bigger than the last, each victory making their war boss more eager to find the next challenge." Magos Kane nodded slowly. "Behavioral manipulation through environmental stimulus. The Greenskins' predictable aggression becomes a tactical asset, elegant in a crude way." "I'll need volunteers," Diana continued. "Small teams to provoke specific orc mobs, then fall back in controlled retreats. We lead them like breadcrumbs toward the main event." Sergeant Vale stepped forward immediately. "Third Company volunteers. We've already fought beside her." "We'll do it again." Others followed, veterans who'd seen Diana fight, soldiers who'd witnessed her save their comrades, even a few who simply preferred her impossible plan to waiting helplessly for overwhelming death. Within an hour, Diana had 12 teams of volunteers ready to bait the most dangerous Xenos in the galaxy. The operation began at dawn. Diana led the first provocation personally, appearing before a mob of 200 orcs who'd been looting a destroyed Imperial depot. She walked into their midst with characteristic directness, sword drawn, shield ready. "Wag!" she shouted in passable Orcish. "I's here for a scrap! Who's the biggest and strongest?" The orcs paused their looting, confused by this tiny human speaking their language and challenging them. Then a massive knob pushed through the crowd, easily 12 feet tall, covered in scars and crude bionics. "I's the biggest!" the knob bellowed. "And I's gonna crump you good!" Diana grinned. "Prove it!" The knob charged with a roar that shook dust from the walls. Diana waited until the last moment, then sidestepped and drove her sword through the joint in his crude armor. The knob crashed to the ground, dead before he realized what happened. The other orcs stared. Then one shouted, "She crumped da knob! She's proper killy!" "Wag!" another added. "We gotta crump her back!" Diana ran. The orcs followed with enthusiastic bloodlust, exactly as planned. She led them on a winding path through the ruins, Vale's squad providing covering fire when the Greenskins got too close. After 3 kilometers, they encountered another orc mob, this one 400 strong. The two groups saw each other, saw potential violence, and with the simple logic that governed orc society, decided to fight each other first to determine who got to chase the shiny human. Diana and Vale's team slipped away, while 600 orcs enjoyed a vigorous scrap. When the dust settled, the survivors, now numbering around 400 bloodied but happy greenskins, looked for their original prey. Diana obligingly appeared at the edge of their visual range, just long enough to draw them toward the next rally point. Across the sectors, the other teams executed similar provocations. Private Corvus lured a mob with nothing but insults and a well-thrown grenade. Lieutenant Yana's team used a jury-rigged loudspeaker to broadcast challenges in Orcish. Magos Kane, displaying surprising tactical creativity, reprogrammed a servo skull to throw rocks at orc leaders while broadcasting derogatory comments about their fighting prowess. By the end of the first day, 8 separate orc mobs had been consolidated into a single horde numbering over 30,000 greenskins, all following rumors of the biggest fight ever happening just over there. They moved with the inexorable momentum of a green tide, crushing everything in their path, including several chaos cult positions that had the misfortune of being in the way. Kharothos noticed. Diana knew he noticed when his forces began shifting formation, preparing to meet the orc threat while still advancing toward Imperial positions. The Daemon Prince was being forced to fight a two-front battle exactly as planned. On the second day, Diana focused on intelligence gathering. She needed to understand Kharothos' capabilities, his force's composition, and most importantly, his psychological state. Wounded pride made enemies reckless, and she definitely wounded his. She took a small team, Vale, Corvus, and 2 combat engineers, on a reconnaissance mission to the Chaos Army's periphery. They moved through the ruins in absolute silence, using Diana's enhanced senses to avoid patrols and her tactical experience to identify key targets. What they found troubled her deeply. Kharothos' army wasn't just large, it was organized. The Daemon Prince had imposed structure on the typically chaotic cultist forces, arranged them into cohesive units with clear chains of command. Demon engines formed heavy support. Elite cultists, those who'd received the most blessings, served as shock troops. And in the center, Kharothos himself directed operations from atop a twisted throne made of melted Imperial tanks. "He's smart," Diana whispered to Vale as they observed from a collapsed building. "Most of the enemies I've fought here are driven by madness or simple hunger, but he's thinking strategically." "Daemon Princes were human once," Vale replied quietly. "The smartest, strongest, most ambitious humans who prove themselves worthy of dark apotheosis. They retain their intelligence even as they transcend mortality." Diana watched Kharothos address his forces, his voice carrying across the battlefield with unnatural resonance. Even from a distance, she could feel the psychic weight of his presence, a pressure against her mind that whispered promises of power and warnings of futility. "You cannot win," the psychic voice suggested. "I am eternal. I am inevitable. Surrender now, and I will make your corruption swift. Resist, and I will make it last millennia." Diana pushed back with her own will, forged by gods and tempered by ages. "I've faced eternal beings before. They all bleed eventually." The psychic pressure withdrew, surprised by her resistance. Then Kharothos laughed, a sound that echoed across both physical and psychic space. "Oh, you are delightful," he projected. "No wonder the dark gods hunger for you. Such purity, such strength, such delicious potential for corruption. When I break you, and I will break you, the rewards will be beyond mortal comprehension." "You're welcome to try," Diana sent back, "but you'll have to go through 30,000 orcs first." "I am aware of your manipulation," Kharothos replied, amusement coloring his mental voice. Did you think me blind to your tactics? I've fought wars across a dozen worlds, commanded armies before you were born. Your provocation of the greenskins is crude but effective, so I will indulge you. Let the orcs come. Let them die on my demon engines and corrupted guns. And when they're broken, when your clever plan has failed, I will come for you personally. The psychic connection severed. Diana exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The mental exchange had lasted seconds but felt like hours. We need to go, she told her team. Now. They retreated with professional haste, Diana's instincts screaming warnings. Behind them, cultist patrols moved with sudden purpose, hunting for infiltrators. Kharothos had detected her presence and dispatched hunters. The teams split up, each taking different routes through the ruins. Diana drew the bulk of pursuit, her divine nature apparently shining like a beacon to corruption-sensitive enemies. She led them on a chase through collapsed buildings and toxic waste zones, using every trick 3,000 years of combat had taught her. A corrupted hellbrute, a space marine dreadnought twisted by chaos into a screaming horror, crashed through a wall ahead of her. Diana didn't slow. She jumped, used the hellbrute's own chassis as a springboard, and vaulted over it before the war machine could track her movement. She reached Imperial lines with cultist pursuit close behind. The defensive positions opened fire, laser guns and heavy bolters shredding her pursuers. The hellbrute tried to follow but ran directly into a pre-positioned minefield. The explosions didn't destroy it, but they bought Diana time to reach safety. In the command center, she delivered her report to Colonel Kassar and Inquisitor Covenant, who'd taken personal interest in the operation's progress. Kharothos knows what we're doing, she concluded. He's choosing to engage the orcs anyway because he's confident he can destroy them, then us. He's not being manipulated. He's accepting our challenge. Pride, Covenant observed. The first step toward damnation and the last weakness of the powerful. He believes himself invincible. Is he wrong? Kassar asked bluntly. Can we actually win this? Diana looked at the tactical display showing 3 armies converging on a single point. Imperial, Chaos, and Orc forces all heading toward the same battlefield. 50,000 Chaos cultists and demon engines. 30,000 Orcs hungry for violence. 15,000 exhausted Imperial soldiers defending their last stronghold. I don't know, she admitted, but I know we have to try. Because if we don't make our stand here, there won't be another chance. The Emperor protects, Drask said reflexively. Diana looked at the Commissar, at the faith carved into her scarred features, and made a decision. She'd spent weeks in this universe learning its rules, understanding its people, seeing how faith served as armor against horror. Maybe it was time to give them something to believe in. Yes, she said, surprising everyone, including herself. In whatever form that takes, he protects. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. She believed in protection, in standing between the innocent and darkness. If these people needed to call that the Emperor's will to find courage, she wouldn't take that from them. Outside, the Orc Wog's thunder grew louder. In the distance, Kharothos' army began its advance. The pieces were moving into position for the largest battle Tertius Prime had seen in decades. And at the center of it all stood Diana, an impossible woman from an impossible place, preparing to do the impossible one more time. The orcs hit Kharothos' left flank at dawn on the 3rd day, and the sound of 30,000 greenskins unleashing a simultaneous WAG registered on seismographs 15 kilometers away. Diana watched from Imperial observation posts as the green tide crashed into corrupted cultist positions like a living avalanche. The orcs had consolidated under war boss Skull Crucia Mech Breaka. who'd emerged from the various scraps as the biggest, meanest, and therefore naturally in charge. He led from the front in a massive suit of mega armor, his power claw carving through demon engines like they were made of parchment. "By the Emperor," Lieutenant Yana breathed, watching through magnoculars. "They're not using tactics. They're not using strategy. They're just hitting things really hard." "That is their tactic," Vial corrected. "And it's working." He wasn't wrong. The Orcs' simple, brutal approach proved surprisingly effective against Chaos forces. Where Imperial soldiers might hesitate or falter when facing demonic corruption, Orcs just saw bigger things to hit. Where normal humans might break under psychic assault, Orcs' primitive psychic field, their collective belief that they were the strongest, provided unexpected protection. A greater demon materialized in the Orcs' path, its form a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth. The Demon Prince probably expected terror, retreat, psychological breakdown. Instead, the Orcs cheered and charged harder. "Look at the size of him!" Skullcrusha bellowed. "I's gonna crump him and take his skull for me throne!" The demon died under 100 crude but effective blows. The Orcs looted its remains with enthusiastic efficiency and kept advancing. Diana smiled grimly. Pure, uncomplicated violence meeting sophisticated corruption, and violence was winning. But Kharothos wasn't panicking. She watched the Demon Prince redirect forces with calculated precision, using his demon engines to create kill zones, channeling the Orc advance into prepared positions. He was fighting smart, using the Greenskins' predictable aggression against them. "He's going to bleed them white," Diana observed. "Make them pay for every meter. By the time they reach his position, they'll be too depleted to threaten him directly." "Then we intervene before that happens," Inquisitor Covenant said, appearing beside her with his usual unsettling silence. "We hit his right flank while he's focused on the Orcs. Split his attention. Force him to fight two enemies simultaneously." Diana turned to face the Inquisitor. "You're proposing we coordinate with Xenos? That's against every Imperial doctrine I've encountered." "I'm proposing we survive," Covenant replied coldly. "Doctrine is for peacetime. We're at war, and war requires pragmatism." He looked at her directly. "You've already demonstrated this principle. Now convince Colonel Kassar to follow it." In the command center, the argument raged for 15 minutes. "Coordinate with Orcs?" Colonel Kassar looked physically pained by the concept. "Commissar, this violates approximately everything," Drask finished. "But the Inquisitor is correct. We adapt or die. I recommend we treat this as temporary alignment of interests, not alliance. We're not helping the Xenos. We're exploiting their aggression for Imperial benefit." "Semantic distinction," Magos Kane observed, "but philosophically acceptable. The Omnissiah teaches adaptation to circumstances." Kassar looked around his command staff, seeing exhaustion and determination in equal measure. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. We attack Kharothos' right flank in 2 hours. All available forces. This is our moment. We either break their army, or they break us." The Imperial assault began with artillery barrage, every remaining basilisk and mortar crew firing in coordinated volleys that hammered Chaos positions. Then came the armor, Leman Russ tanks advancing in wedge formation with Iron Testament leading the way, its machine spirit singing with restored purpose. Behind the armor, 15,000 guardsmen advanced in disciplined waves. Diana fought at the spearhead, her presence inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. She'd become a legend in the 3 days since her arrival. The woman who couldn't die, who fought demon princes and walked away, who healed machines with truth and killed corruption with light. Soldiers fought harder when she was near, pushed themselves beyond normal limits because if she could be impossible, maybe they could too. The Chaos right flank collapsed faster than expected. Kharothos had committed too many forces to stopping the orcs, leaving his opposite side vulnerable. Diana carved through cultist formations with methodical efficiency, while Vale's company and others followed in her wake, securing positions and eliminating stragglers. But as they advanced, Diana felt the trap closing. Kharothos had anticipated this move. Of course he had. He was ancient, experienced, and fighting with the clarity of purpose that came from absolute corruption. He'd let the orcs engage his left flank, invited the Imperial assault on his right, and now... "Fall back!" Diana screamed as psychic pressure exploded across the battlefield. The ground beneath Imperial forces erupted. Cultists who'd been hiding in underground tunnels burst forth, surrounding the advancing guardsmen. Demon engines that had appeared destroyed reactivated, their corrupted machine spirits laughing with malevolent joy. And from the center of chaos positions, Kharothos himself rose into the air on wings of tortured souls. "Did you think me blind to your tactics?" His voice boomed across the battlefield. "I have fought wars for millennia. I have commanded armies that conquered worlds. You are children playing at strategy." He gestured, and reality tore. A warp rift opened directly in the Imperial formation center, and demons poured through, lesser spawn of the dark gods, but numerous and hungry. Guardsmen opened fire, but laser guns were pathetically inadequate against entities that existed half in real space and half in the immaterium. Diana saw the formation breaking, saw panic spreading, saw soldiers dying to enemies they couldn't comprehend, let alone defeat. She made a decision born of 3,000 years of leadership. She threw her voice, amplifying it with divine authority that cut through the chaos. "Imperial forces to me! Form square around my position! Present weapons outward!" The soldiers responded with trained instinct, falling back to her position and forming a defensive square. A formation ancient even by old Earth standards, but effective when surrounded. They fired outward in disciplined volleys, creating a wall of lass fire that kept demons at bay, even if it couldn't kill them. Diana stood at the square's center and unwound the lasso of Hestia. She'd never tried this before, never tested the lasso's limits like this, but desperation bred innovation. She spun the lasso over her head, letting it extend impossibly far, then brought it down in a circle around the entire Imperial formation. The golden rope hit the ground and blazed with light so intense it hurt to look at directly. The demons recoiled, screaming. Truth was anathema to creatures born from lies. The lasso created a barrier they couldn't cross, a zone of absolute reality that rejected their warp-touched existence. "Hold this position!" Diana commanded. "Artillery, target the rift! Close it before more come through!" The basilisks adjusted aim, firing not at enemies, but at the tear in reality itself. High explosive shells detonated against the warp rift, and while they couldn't close it, they destabilized it enough to slow the demon flow. Kharothos descended toward Diana's position, his sword blazing with warp fire. "Clever, but temporary. Your barrier weakens with every moment, and my forces surround you. Surrender now, and I will make your corruption merciful." "I have a better idea," Diana replied, and her voice carried across the Vox to every Imperial unit on the battlefield. "Iron Testament, fire on my position. Maximum range, high explosive." "She's insane!" someone shouted. But Iron Testament understood. The tank's machine spirit, purged of corruption by Diana's truth, trusted her completely. Its main gun elevated to maximum angle and fired. Diana tracked the shell's trajectory with divine perception, waited 3 heartbeats, then released the lasso barrier and threw herself skyward. Her god-born strength launched her directly into the shell's path. She caught it mid-flight, 60 kilograms of high explosive traveling at supersonic speed, redirected its trajectory with a twist of her body, and hurled it directly at Kharothos. The Demon Prince tried to dodge, but Diana had calculated the angle perfectly, accounting for his flight speed and reaction time. The shell struck him center mass and detonated. The explosion consumed Kharothos in fire and shrapnel. He fell from the sky, crashing into his own lines with an impact that crushed cultists beneath his armored bulk. He wasn't dead. Demon Princes didn't die easily, but he was wounded, stunned, and most importantly, grounded. Diana landed in a crouch that cracked the rockcrete and sprinted toward the fallen Demon Prince. She had maybe 30 seconds before he recovered, before his supernatural resilience reasserted itself. She had to make them count. Cultists tried to block her path. She went through them like they weren't there. Shield bash, sword strike, forward momentum, never slowing. A demon engine fired. She deflected the shot with her bracers and kept running. Kharothos struggled to his feet, his armor cracked, ichor leaking from a dozen wounds. He saw Diana coming and raised his sword in guard position. They met with a clash that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Their duel became the focal point of the entire battle. 3 armies, Imperial, Chaos, and Orc, paused their slaughter to watch as Amazon Princess and Demon Prince traded blows that carved reality itself. Kharothos fought with millennia of experience and the power of the dark gods flowing through his corrupted form. His blade wept blood and madness, each strike attempting to wound not just Diana's body, but her soul, her sanity, her very concept of self. He was faster than mortals could track, stronger than space marines, skilled beyond human limitation. Diana matched him. She moved with the precision taught by the greatest warriors of Themyscira, refined through 3,000 years of combat against gods, monsters, and tyrants. Her sword, forged by Hephaestus, blessed by Zeus, cut through demon-touched armor as if it were paper. Her shield absorbed blows that should have shattered mountains, and her will, her absolute refusal to break or yield, proved stronger than corruption itself. "You cannot defeat me!" Kharothos roared, his voice layered with psychic power that made cultists and guardsmen alike clutch their heads in agony. "I have transcended mortality. I am eternal." Diana ducked under his wild swing, drove her shoulder into his chest, and used his own momentum to throw him over her hip. The Demon Prince crashed to the ground, and for just a moment surprise showed on his horned face. "Eternal doesn't mean unbeatable," Diana replied. She pressed her advantage, her sword finding gaps in his armor, her strikes methodical and devastating. "It just means you've had more time to accumulate weaknesses." Kharothos lashed out with desperate fury, his blade carving an arc that would have bisected a tank. Diana's bracers came together in an X-block, and the impact of divine artifact meeting corrupted steel produced a sound like reality breaking. The shockwave sent both fighters skidding backward. Around them, the larger battle raged with renewed intensity. The Orcs, seeing a proper scrap between 2 obviously strong opponents, pushed harder against Chaos lines, wanting to claim victory before the fight concluded. The Imperial forces rallied, inspired by Diana's refusal to yield. Even the Chaos cultists fought with increased desperation, knowing their champion's defeat would mean their annihilation. Inquisitor Covenant watched from the command chimera, his expression unreadable. "She's going to win," he said quietly. "Emperor preserve us. She's actually going to kill a demon prince in single combat." "Is that a problem?" Commissar Drask asked. "It's unprecedented. Living saints wound demon princes." Greater demons sometimes destroy each other. But a mortal, even an enhanced mortal, killing a champion of the dark gods in open combat? Covenant shook his head. If word spreads across the Imperium, it will destabilize theological doctrine. It suggests victory is possible without absolute faith in the Emperor. But it is possible, Drask observed, her augmetic eye tracking Diana's movements. We're watching it happen. That's what makes it dangerous, Covenant replied. On the battlefield, Diana drove Kharothos back step by step. She wasn't just fighting him physically, she was fighting the corruption he represented, the despair he spread, the lies he embodied. Every strike of her sword was a rejection of his worldview. Every deflection of his blade was a statement that purity could endure in even the darkest universe. Kharothos felt his confidence cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd fought champions of the Emperor before, watched them fall to corruption or simple exhaustion. But this woman didn't tire, didn't waver, didn't doubt. She fought with absolute certainty that he could be beaten, and that certainty was proving stronger than his dark power. "What are you?" he demanded, genuine confusion coloring his voice. "You're not a living saint. You don't channel the Emperor's power. You're not a demon. You carry no warp taint. You're not even enhanced beyond normal human limits. You're something else entirely." "I'm someone who chose truth over power," Diana replied, her sword finding his shoulder, carving through corrupted flesh. "Someone who refuses to compromise principles for survival. Someone who believes that justice and compassion aren't weaknesses in a dark universe. They're the only things that make the darkness bearable." She caught his next strike on her shield, stepped inside his guard, and drove her sword through his chest. The blade pierced his primary heart. Daemon Princes kept multiple hearts, but the pain and shock were real. Kharothos staggered backward, ichor gushing from the wound. His eyes widened as he felt his connection to the warp weakening, his patron's favor withdrawing as defeat became inevitable. "No," he gasped. "This isn't... I cannot fall to... You're just a mortal!" "I'm Diana of Themyscira," she corrected, pulling her sword free. "And I've killed gods before." She swung for his neck. Kharothos raised his blade to block, but the movement was slow, weakened by blood loss and shock. Diana's sword carved through his guard, through his gorget, through the corrupted flesh beneath. The Daemon Prince's head separated from his body in a spray of ichor. His body collapsed, armor clanging against rockcrete. For a moment, his severed head's eyes stayed open, shock and disbelief frozen on its features. Then the body began to dissolve, corruption consuming itself from within as the demon essence fled back to the warp. Within seconds, nothing remained except corroded armor and a stain on the ground that steamed in the toxic air. The battlefield fell silent. 50,000 cultists, 30,000 orcs, 15,000 guardsmen, all stopped fighting to process what they'd witnessed. Diana stood over the dissolved remains of Kharothos the Enlightened, her sword still raised, her armor stained with demon ichor, and raised her voice with divine projection. "Your champion is dead! Your Daemon Prince has fallen! There is no dark salvation waiting for you! Surrender or be destroyed!" The effect was immediate and devastating. The Chaos Army's coherence shattered like glass. Cultists who'd fought with fanatical certainty suddenly felt doubt creeping in. Demon engines whose machine spirits had been bolstered by Kharothos' presence began malfunctioning. The warp rift that had been pouring reinforcements flickered and collapsed. The orcs, seeing the chaos forces wavering, charged with renewed enthusiasm. They'd come for a good fight, and watching someone crump a demon prince was absolutely proper entertainment. Now it was time to finish the job. The Imperial forces advanced, their formation restored, their faith in the Emperor, in Diana, in their own ability to survive, burning bright. They moved with coordinated precision, crushing scattered cultist resistance, securing positions, taking prisoners when possible, and executing the irredeemably corrupted when necessary. It wasn't a rout. It was an execution. Diana watched the Chaos Army disintegrate, feeling no satisfaction in the slaughter. These corrupted cultists had been human once, had made choices, or had choices made for them by desperation and darkness. But they'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, embraced corruption that couldn't be cleansed. Mercy sometimes meant a quick death rather than a slow, agonizing return to humanity that would never come. Sergeant Vale reached her position, his armor scorched and his face blackened by smoke but alive. His company had survived mostly intact, moving in Diana's wake and securing her flanks throughout the battle. "We did it," he said, disbelief clear in his voice. "We actually won." "We survived," Diana corrected. "That's not quite the same thing." She looked across the battlefield at the thousands of bodies, cultist, orc, Imperial, and felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. Every death here could be traced back to her plan, her tactics, her decision to turn this into a three-way slaughter. The fact that it had worked didn't make it feel less heavy. "The orcs are withdrawing," Lieutenant Yana reported over the Vox. "They're satisfied with the fight. Their war boss is claiming victory and looking for new challenges elsewhere." "Let them go," Colonel Kasser ordered. "We don't have the forces to fight them, and they've done us more good than harm today. Mark it as temporary cessation of hostilities with Xenos forces." Commissar Drask's voice crackled over the command frequency. "Colonel, that terminology is dangerously close to admitting alliance with Xenos." "Then don't put it in the official report," Kassar replied tiredly. "Just put that we achieved total victory over Chaos forces through the Emperor's will and outstanding tactical planning." Which is true, in its own way. Diana returned to the command bunker as evening fell across Tertius Prime. The toxic sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful on any other world. Here, it just highlighted the smoke and ash still rising from the battlefield. Inquisitor Covenant waited for her in the command center, his expression thoughtful rather than hostile. When she entered, he performed a gesture she'd seen Imperial soldiers make, the sign of the Aquila, hands crossed over chest in the shape of the Emperor's eagle. "You have proven yourself," Covenant said formally. "Not as saint, not as heretic, but as something the Imperium has desperately needed. A reminder that victory is possible even in our darkest hour. You've killed a demon prince, saved 15,000 Imperial soldiers, and defended a hive world against overwhelming odds." "I had help," Diana replied. "Your soldiers fought bravely. Colonel Kassar's tactics were sound. Even the orcs contributed in their way." "Humility," Covenant observed. "Another uncommon virtue in the 41st millennium." He stepped closer, his scarred face serious. "I'm officially classifying you as an Imperial asset of extreme value. You'll have freedom to operate across this sector, with my authority backing your actions. But know this, that freedom comes with expectation. The Imperium doesn't grant power without demanding service in return." "I'm still looking for a way home," Diana reminded him. "This isn't my universe. I have responsibilities elsewhere." I know, Covenant replied. And I will help you search, because keeping you here against your will would be both morally wrong and tactically foolish. Resentful allies are worse than open enemies. But until we find a way to return you to your dimension, I ask that you continue serving humanity's cause. Will you accept? Diana looked around the command center, at exhausted officers celebrating survival, at tech priests already planning reconstruction, at soldiers who'd learned that hope wasn't heresy if backed by courage and competence. She thought about leaving, about abandoning these people to their grim darkness. She couldn't do it. Not yet. I accept, she said. For as long as I'm trapped here, I'll fight beside you. Not because I worship your emperor, but because I believe in protecting humanity in any universe. Covenant nodded slowly. That will have to be enough. The week following Kharothos' death brought unexpected challenges, not from external enemies, but from the Imperium itself. Diana discovered that killing a demon prince made her simultaneously the most valuable and most dangerous asset on Tertius Prime. Colonel Cassa received 17 Vox transmissions from various Imperial authorities demanding her presence, her weapons, or her execution, depending on which faction was making demands. The Mechanicus wanted to study her equipment. The Ecclesiarchy wanted to canonize her or burn her. They couldn't decide which. 3 different Space Marine chapters requested information about her capabilities, and everywhere Diana went, common soldiers treated her with reverence that made her deeply uncomfortable. They're building shrines, Sergeant Vael reported, finding Diana in the repair bay where she'd been helping Magos Kane restore damaged vehicles. Little altars with your name on them. Some are praying to you. Diana's head snapped up. What? No, absolutely not. Tell them to stop. I tried, Vael said helplessly. They think you're a living saint. They saw you kill a demon prince. They watched you walk through fire and corruption without falling. To them, you're proof the Emperor still sends champions. I'm not anyone's saint, Diana insisted, standing abruptly. I'm just someone trying to help until I can go home. She found the first shrine in what had been a ruined chapel, now hastily cleaned and repaired by grateful civilians. Someone had painted her image on the wall in crude but recognizable style, showing her holding sword and shield, haloed in golden light. Below it, civilians knelt in prayer, their voices joining in litanies that mixed imperial devotion with personal thanks. And she stood against the darkness when all hope seemed lost. The golden warrior who cannot fall. Blessed daughter of the Emperor, hear our prayers. Diana felt her stomach turn. She'd seen this before in different forms, people desperate for heroes, for symbols, for something to believe in. She'd been idolized before and had learned to accept gratitude gracefully. But this was different. This was worship, and worship led to expectations no mortal, not even a god-born warrior, could fulfill. Please don't, she said quietly, and her voice carried across the chapel with divine clarity. The worshippers turned, seeing her standing in the doorway. I'm not divine by your standards. I'm not sent by your emperor. I'm just someone who fights for what's right. An elderly woman approached, her face scarred by years in the hive's toxic environment. You saved my grandchildren, she said simply. When the cultists came, when we thought all was lost, you stood between them and death. What else would we call that except a miracle? Diana struggled for words. How could she explain that heroism didn't require divinity? that humans could be extraordinary without supernatural intervention. That the courage these people showed every day, surviving in this nightmare world, maintaining their humanity despite endless horror, was just as miraculous as anything she'd done. "Your soldiers are the real heroes," she finally said. "They fight every day knowing they might not survive. They protect each other, care for the wounded, maintain hope in hopeless situations. I just helped. They're the ones who endure." "Then we'll honor them too," the old woman replied. "But we won't stop thanking you. You gave us something we'd forgotten existed. Proof that evil can be defeated. That's worth worship, saint or not." Diana left the chapel feeling troubled. Inquisitor Covenant found her an hour later, standing on the command bunker's observation deck, watching reconstruction efforts across the hive. "Bothered by the adulation?" Covenant asked, joining her at the railing. "I don't want to be worshipped," Diana said. "I want to help and then leave. But they're building me into something I'm not." "Welcome to the Imperium," Covenant replied dryly. "We build myths because reality is too terrible to face unadorned. These people have lived their entire lives in toxic darkness, worked until exhaustion, and died by the thousands in wars they barely understand. Can you blame them for wanting to believe something cares about their suffering?" "I do care," Diana protested. "But I'm not their salvation. I'm just one person." "One person who killed a demon prince," Covenant reminded her. "One person who healed machine spirits with truth and rallied broken armies to victory. In the Imperium, that makes you exceptional, possibly unique." He paused. "And therefore, dangerous." Diana turned to face him fully. "Dangerous to whom?" "To the established order. To the careful balance between faith and control that keeps the Imperium functioning." Covenant's scarred face showed something like respect. "You represent an alternative. The possibility that humanity might survive without total submission to Imperial doctrine. That's either the greatest hope or the greatest threat the Imperium has faced in millennia." "Which do you think it is?" Diana asked. Covenant was quiet for a long moment. "Both," he finally admitted. "And I don't know which aspect will prove stronger." That evening, Diana attended a formal recognition ceremony that Colonel Kasser insisted on holding. The entire surviving garrison assembled in the command bunker's main hall. 15,000 soldiers who'd faced impossible odds and survived. Kasser presented her with an Honorifica Imperialis, the medal reserved for civilians showing exceptional courage under fire. "You fought beside the Imperial Guard and proved that courage transcends origin," Kasser said formally. "You saved thousands of lives, destroyed uncountable enemies, and demonstrated valor beyond requirement or expectation. The Imperium recognizes your service." Diana accepted the medal with grace, even though she knew the political calculation behind it. By formally recognizing her, the Imperium claimed her accomplishments as its own, wrapped her actions in imperial legitimacy. She was being absorbed into their narrative whether she agreed or not. But looking at the assembled soldiers, seeing Vale and his company, the tank crews who'd fought beside Iron Testament, the civilians who'd survived because someone stood between them and horror, Diana realized something important. She didn't need to accept their theology to work within their system. She could be Diana of Themyscira, with her own beliefs and principles, while still serving alongside people who saw the universe differently. Truth didn't require everyone to agree on its source, only on its importance. After the ceremony, as Diana returned to her quarters, a small room hastily prepared in the command bunker's officer section, she found an unexpected visitor waiting. A space marine stood in the corridor, his power armor painted in the blue and gold of the Ultramarines chapter. He stood 8 feet tall, a warrior who'd been transformed into something beyond human through ancient and terrible processes. His face, visible through his removed helm, showed the chiseled perfection of genetic enhancement and the hard experience of centuries of war. "Diana of Themyscira," he said, his voice resonant and commanding. "I am Brother Sergeant Claudius of the Ultramarines 4th Company. I've been dispatched to observe and evaluate you." Diana had heard about Space Marines, the Emperor's Angels of Death, humanity's greatest warriors, genetically enhanced super soldiers who served as the Imperium's ultimate weapon. She'd been curious when she'd meet one. "Observe and evaluate," she repeated. "That sounds ominous." "Pragmatic," Claudius corrected. "Reports of your capabilities have reached my chapter. A warrior who killed a Daemon Prince in single combat deserves investigation. I'm here to determine if you're ally, threat, or something unprecedented. And if I refuse to be evaluated, then I report that finding, and my chapter makes decisions accordingly." Claudius studied her with eyes that had witnessed atrocities across a dozen worlds. "But I suspect you're too intelligent for unnecessary antagonism. You understand that proving yourself to the Adeptus Astartes opens doors the rest of the Imperium cannot." Diana considered. Space Marines represented the Imperium's military elite, removed from normal command structures and politics. Earning their respect might indeed prove valuable, or it might put her deeper into imperial obligations she didn't fully understand. "What kind of evaluation?" she asked carefully. "Combat assessment," Claudius replied. "I challenge you to a sparring match, non-lethal but full effort. I test your capabilities. You demonstrate your worthiness. We both gain understanding." Diana smiled slightly. "You want to fight me to see if I'm as good as reported?" "Yes," Claudius said simply. "That is our way. We trust action over words, prowess over promises. Will you accept?" Diana thought about refusing. She was tired from the recent battle, still processing the emotional weight of thousands of deaths. But she also recognized the opportunity. If she could earn the respect of the Space Marines through honest combat, it might ease her position in this complicated universe. "Tomorrow morning," she agreed. "Neutral ground. No weapons that would cause permanent damage. Agreed?" "Agreed," Claudius replied. "I look forward to it. Few warriors in this galaxy would accept such a challenge. That alone speaks well of you." After he left, Diana sat on her quarter's simple cot and felt the full weight of exhaustion finally crash down. She'd been in this universe less than 2 weeks and had already fought a war, killed a Daemon Prince, became a symbol to desperate people, and now faced evaluation by superhuman warriors. All she'd wanted was to go home, to return to Themyscira, to her world, to the clear moral certainties she'd spent 3 millennia defending. But home felt impossibly distant, separated not by miles, but by dimensional barriers she didn't know how to cross. For the first time since arriving, Diana allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She missed her sisters, missed Diana Trevor's world, missed the certainty of knowing who her enemies were and what victory meant. The 41st millennium was too dark, too complex, too willing to sacrifice everything for survival. But it was also where she was needed. And Diana had never been good at ignoring need, no matter how inconvenient. She lay back on the cot, her hand resting on her sword's hilt, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she'd fight a space marine, Next week would bring new challenges. Next month, new horrors. Welcome to the 41st millennium, she thought, where hope is heresy, faith is weaponized, and somehow, impossibly, humanity endures. She closed her eyes and dreamed of home. The sparring arena had been cleared in what was once a cargo bay, a space large enough for combat without risk of collateral damage to critical infrastructure. Word had spread despite attempts at discretion, and now nearly 1,000 soldiers lined the perimeter, eager to witness Diana face a space marine in single combat. Brother Sergeant Claudius stood at one end of the arena, his power armor removed to create fairer conditions. Even without the ceramite plating, he was impressive. 7.5 feet of enhanced muscle and bone, his physiology rebuilt by arcane processes that made him superhuman. He wore training armor that still provided protection but wouldn't give overwhelming advantage. Diana faced him from the opposite end, her divine armor gleaming in the harsh work lights. She'd agreed to limit herself to sword and shield, no lasso, no bracer's deflection abilities, just blade work and tactics. "Ready?" Colonel Kasser called from the observation position, serving as informal referee. "Ready," Diana confirmed. "Begin." Claudius moved first, crossing the distance with speed that surprised Diana. Space Marines were fast despite their size, their enhanced physiology allowing acceleration and reaction times far beyond human norms. His training blade, a power sword set to non-lethal settings, came in a textbook strike aimed at her shoulder. Diana parried, feeling the impact reverberate through her arm. He was strong, stronger than most opponents she'd faced. Enhanced strength meeting divine power in a clash of fundamentally different origins reaching similar results. She riposted, her blade seeking the gap under his arm. Claudius blocked, pivoted, and launched a combination that would have overwhelmed a normal opponent through sheer speed and power. Diana gave ground, her 3,000 years of experience allowing her to read his patterns, predict his next moves. "You fight defensively," Claudius observed, pressing his advantage. "Testing me." "Learning," Diana corrected, deflecting another strike. "Every opponent has patterns. Even perfect training creates predictable responses." She found the pattern 3 exchanges later. Claudius favored his right side by approximately 8%, compensating for old injuries or training bias. He telegraphed power strikes with a slight tensing of his shoulders, and he expected opponents to be intimidated by his size and strength. Diana stopped retreating and attacked. Her blade moved in combinations that made the watching soldiers gasp, strikes flowing from defense to offense seamlessly, each movement efficient and devastatingly precise. Claudius found himself defending, his enhanced reactions barely keeping pace with her speed. "You're not human," he said, genuine surprise coloring his voice. "I never claimed to be," Diana replied, her blade finding his shoulder in a strike that would have drawn blood if the weapons were live. "Point to me." Claudius stepped back, reassessing. In hundreds of training matches against battle brothers, he'd never been tagged so cleanly. This woman fought with a skill that transcended mere training. This was art perfected over lifetimes. He changed tactics, using his superior strength to create overwhelming offense. His blade came in hammer blows designed to shatter defenses through raw power. Diana adapted, using angular deflections that redirected force rather than absorbing it, moving like water around his attacks while her counters accumulated. Shoulder, ribs, thigh, each touch a point scored. The watching crowd was silent, transfixed. They were witnessing something unprecedented. A space marine, the Emperor's finest warrior, being outfought by a woman in what should have been a sparring match, but had become a masterclass in combat excellence. 15 minutes in, Claudius called halt. Both fighters separated, breathing hard, but neither exhausted. "Enough," the Space Marine said. "I've learned what I came to learn." He approached Diana with his training blade lowered. "You are the finest warrior I've faced outside my chapter. Your skill transcends the merely exceptional. If the reports say you killed a demon prince, I believe them. You have the capability." "Thank you," Diana said sincerely. "You're an excellent fighter. Your chapter trains well." "We trained for 500 years before being worthy of the ultramarine name," Claudius replied. "How long have you trained?" 3,000 years, Diana admitted. The Space Marine's enhanced eyebrows rose fractionally, the closest thing to shock his transhuman physiology allowed. "Impossible. No human lives that long without corruption or—" He paused. "You're not human. Not entirely. What are you?" Diana considered her answer carefully. Claudius had earned honesty through respect and combat. "I'm the daughter of Zeus, king of the Olympian gods. I was born on an island of warrior women who'd been granted immortality. I've lived over 3 millennia, fighting wars, defending the innocent, and learning that heroism is a choice, not a gift." She met his enhanced gaze. "I'm from another universe entirely, pulled here by accident. And I'm trying to find my way home while helping where I can." Claudius processed this information with the tactical mind of a warrior who'd seen the galaxy's impossibilities made real. Finally, he nodded. "Other universes, divine parentage, immortal warriors." He smiled slightly, a rare expression for a Space Marine. "In the 41st millennium, I've fought demons and aliens that defy description. Why not heroes from parallel realities?" He executed a formal salute, fist to chest. "You have my respect, Diana of Themyscira, and through me, the attention of the Ultramarines. Should you require aid, send word. We honor worthy warriors regardless of origin." After Claudius departed aboard his Thunderhawk, Diana found Inquisitor Covenant waiting in her quarters. "The Space Marine approved of you," Covenant observed. "That's significant. The Adeptus Astartes don't give respect lightly." "He earned mine as well," Diana replied. "Skilled, honorable, dedicated to protecting humanity. Different methods than mine, but similar goals." "Don't romanticize them," Covenant warned. "Space Marines are weapons, not saviors. They're built for war and function best in war. But you're right that they serve humanity in their way." He paused. "I've found something. Information that might help you return home." Diana's attention sharpened immediately. "What kind of information?" Covenant produced a data slate. "Records from the Navigator houses mention similar phenomena to what brought you here. Warp storms that briefly connected to places outside normal reality. They're rare, unpredictable, and dangerous. But they exist. There's a theory among rogue traders and explorers that certain warp routes don't just traverse the galaxy, they touch other dimensions entirely." "How do I find these routes?" Diana asked, hope and caution warring in her chest. "That's the challenge. You'd need access to restricted navigator charts, cooperation from the Navy's Nobilite, who guard their knowledge jealously, and probably a starship capable of surviving experimental warp jumps." Covenant's scared face showed sympathy. "It's not impossible, but it's not simple either. You're looking at months of research, negotiation, and preparation." "Months," Diana repeated. She'd been hoping for days, maybe weeks, but months meant deeper entanglement with the Imperium, more battles, more people depending on her. "I'm sorry," Covenant said, and seemed to mean it. "But I promise I'll continue investigating. You saved this world. The least I can do is help you leave it." After Covenant left, Diana stood alone in her quarters, processing everything. She was trapped in the 41st millennium for the foreseeable future. She'd become a symbol to desperate people. She'd earned the respect of superhuman warriors and the attention of an empire spanning millions of worlds. All she'd wanted was to go home. But Diana had learned long ago that wanting and having were different things. Heroes didn't get to choose their battles. They showed up where needed and fought regardless of personal preference. She looked at the Honorifica Imperialis medal Kasser had presented, the crude shrine paintings civilians had made, the reports of soldiers who fought harder because she fought beside them. She thought about Veil's company, about Iron Testament's restored machine spirit, about 3,000 civilians who were alive because she'd stood between them and death. Maybe home could wait. Maybe, in this dark millennium, she'd found a different kind of purpose. Not the clear moral victories of her world, but the grinding, exhausting, never-ending work of holding back darkness one battle at a time. It wasn't what she'd planned, but it was what these people needed. And Diana had never been good at saying no to need. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Sergeant Veil entered at her acknowledgement, his expression uncertain. "Ma'am, there's a situation developing in Sector 14. Civilians are reporting strange sounds from the Underhive, and our patrols are finding evidence of Xenos infiltration. Colonel wants to know if you'll accompany the investigation team." Diana picked up her sword and settled her shield on her arm. "Of course. What kind of Xenos?" "Unknown," Veil admitted. "But the signatures match something called Genestealers. The Colonel says they're bad news. Vanguard organisms for something worse." "Then we'd better investigate before worse arrives," Diana replied, following Veil toward the motor pool. Just another day in the 41st millennium. Another threat, another battle, another chance to prove that hope wasn't heresy. It was the only thing that made survival worth fighting for. Diana stepped into the Chimera transport, her fellow soldiers making room with respectful nods. As the vehicle lurched forward into Tertius Prime's toxic darkness, she allowed herself a small smile. Home would have to wait. Right now, people needed protecting, and that ultimately was what being a hero meant, showing up when needed, regardless of where needed happened to be. Even if it was in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where there was only war. The Underhive of Tertius Prime descended 15 levels below the inhabited zones. A labyrinth of abandoned factories, collapsed transit tunnels, and toxic waste pools that civilization had simply built over rather than cleaned. It was dark, dangerous, and according to Imperial doctrine, officially uninhabited. The screams echoing up from level 12 suggested otherwise. Diana descended with Veil's company and a specialized kill team trained in close-quarters Xenos combat. Their Ausspec scanners painted the darkness in green wireframe, showing movement in the abandoned structures ahead. Fast movement, coordinated movement, predatory movement. Genestealers confirmed, the kill team leader reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. Motion sensors show at least 40 contacts, possibly more hiding in scanner dead zones. They've established a nest. Diana had read the intelligence briefs on Genestealers during her time in the command bunker. They were Xenos horrors. 4-armed killers with diamond-hard claws that could carve through armor, enhanced speed that made them nearly impossible to target, and worst of all, a psychic connection that allowed them to coordinate attacks with hive mind efficiency. They infiltrated human populations, implanted genetic material that created hybrid cultists, and served as advanced scouts for the Tyrannid hive fleets. galaxy-consuming swarms of biological horror that devoured entire worlds. One Genestealer was a crisis. 40 represented a potential planetary extinction event if left unchecked. "Standard purge protocols," Vale ordered. "Flamers forward. Laze guns in support. We burn the nest and collapse the tunnels behind us. No survivors, no mercy." The soldiers advanced with grim professionalism. They'd fought chaos and survived. Genestealers were just a different flavor of nightmare. The first contact came fast. A Genestealer dropped from the ceiling onto a soldier, its claws carving through his flak armor like paper. The man screamed once before his throat was torn out. His squad responded with disciplined lass fire, burning the creature's carapace, but it took 17 shots to finally bring it down. "They're too fast," someone shouted. "Can't get a clean—" Two more Genestealers burst from a side tunnel. Diana intercepted them before they reached the formation, her sword carving through the first creature's skull while her shield blocked the second's claws. The impact drove her back half a meter. These things were strong, stronger even than Chaos Spawn. But Diana had fought faster opponents, had trained against Cheetah, who moved at supersonic speeds, had dueled gods who could reshape reality mid-combat. The Genestealers were dangerous, yes, but they were comprehensible. She killed the second Genestealer with a precise strike to its primary nerve cluster, then called to the soldiers, "They coordinate through psychic connection. Kill one, the others feel it and adapt. We need to overwhelm their collective processing." "How?" Vale demanded, firing at a Genestealer that skittered along the wall with impossible agility. "Hit them from multiple directions simultaneously. Force them to divide attention." Diana charged forward, drawing Genestealer attention deliberately. Behind her, the kill team split into 3-man fire teams, each engaging different targets, each strike forcing the hive mind to process multiple threats at once. The tactic worked. Genestealers were efficient killers, but their strength came from coordination. When forced to defend against simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors, their response times slowed fractionally. And in combat, fractions meant everything. Diana reached the nest's center, a chamber that had once been a water treatment facility, now corrupted into a breeding ground. Genestealer eggs covered every surface, pulsing with unnatural life. And in the center, something worse: human civilians. Their eyes glazed with psychic contamination, their bodies already showing the first mutations of hybrid transformation. They were still alive, still partially human. But the Genestealer genetic corruption had already begun rewriting their biology at the cellular level. "Emperor's mercy," Vale whispered, arriving beside Diana. "They've infected civilians. How many?" Diana counted quickly. 23 visible, probably more in the deeper tunnels. "Kill them all," the kill team leader ordered flatly. "Infected civilians are already lost. Standard purge." "Wait," Diana interrupted. "They're still human. Mostly. If we can extract them before the transformation completes, maybe your medikey can—" "There is no cure for Genestealer infection," the kill team leader stated. "Once the genetic material integrates, the victim is irreversibly corrupted. They'll birth hybrids, who'll birth more hybrids, until the entire planet becomes a Genestealer cult. The only mercy is a quick death." Diana looked at the infected civilians, saw mothers, fathers, children whose only crime was living in the wrong place when the Xenos arrived. Her every instinct screamed to save them, to find a way, to refuse the brutally pragmatic calculation that wrote them off as acceptable losses. But she also understood the math. 23 infected could become hundreds, then thousands, then millions. Could doom the entire planet to consumption by the Tyranid hive fleet. The needs of millions outweighed the lives of 23. Understanding the necessity didn't make it hurt less. "Do it quickly," she said quietly. Make it as painless as possible. The kill team executed the infected with professional efficiency. Diana turned away, unable to watch. She'd killed before. Gods, monsters, tyrants, but always those who'd made choices, who'd embraced evil willingly. These people were victims, and their execution felt like failure even though it was necessary. "This is what the Imperium is," Vale said softly, appearing beside her. "Impossible choices, necessary evils, survival purchased with pieces of our humanity. Every day, every battle, every decision, we sacrifice something to keep going. After a while, you stop counting what you've lost. You just focus on what you've saved." Diana nodded, not trusting her voice. She understood survival, understood triage, understood that heroes sometimes had to make choices that haunted them forever. But understanding didn't make it easier. The kill team finished placing demolition charges throughout the nest. Charges set. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. They retreated through the underhive with Genestealers harrying their every step. The creatures knew their nest was doomed and fought with desperate fury. Diana held the rear guard, her sword and shield work buying the soldiers time to fall back in good order. When they reached the surface level, the kill team leader triggered the charges. The explosion rumbled through Tertius Prime's substructure, collapsing tunnels and sealing the nest permanently. 43 Genestealers dead, 23 infected civilians executed, Sector 14 secured. Another victory in the 41st Millennium's endless war. Diana sat in the Chimera during the return journey, her armor spattered with Xeno's blood, her thoughts dark. Vial handed her a flask of something that smelled like industrial solvent, but was apparently what passed for alcohol in the Imperial Guard. "First purge operation?" he asked. "First, where the victims were still partially innocent," Diana replied, taking a small sip and immediately regretting it. The liquid burned like fire. "Gets easier," Vale said. "Or you get harder. Same result, different path." He took the flask back. "For what it's worth, you made the right choice. Doesn't feel right, doesn't sit easy, but it was still right. That's command, making decisions that cost you sleep so others can sleep safely." Back in the command center, Colonel Kasser reviewed the operation's results with satisfaction. Nest eliminated. Xeno's threat contained. Minimal Imperial casualties. Well done, all involved. But Diana saw the cost written in the soldiers' faces, the haunted expressions of people who'd done necessary evil and knew they'd do it again tomorrow. This was what broke people in the 41st millennium, she realized. Not the physical combat, not even the horror of the enemies they faced. It was the accumulation of morally gray choices, the death by 1,000 compromises, the gradual erosion of everything that made them human. And yet, they endured. They fought. They chose survival over surrender, duty over despair. That night, Diana stood on the command bunker's observation deck, watching Tertius Prime's toxic sunset. In 3 weeks, she'd fought a war, killed a Daemon Prince, earned the respect of Space Marines, and executed infected civilians. She'd become a symbol to desperate people and a weapon for an empire she didn't fully understand or agree with. Inquisitor Covenant joined her, his presence announced by the soft click of augmetic joints. "I've been thinking about what you said," Diana spoke first. "About me being dangerous because I offer an alternative to the Imperium's way. You're right. I do. Because I believe humanity deserves better than this." She gestured at the hive below. better than endless war, better than faith maintained through fear, better than sacrificing everything for survival, until survival is all that remains. We don't have better, Covenant replied quietly. We have survival. That's all the 41st millennium offers. The Emperor protects, yes, but he protects through blood, sacrifice, and the grinding obliteration of anything that threatens humanity's continued existence. It's ugly. It's brutal. It's also the only reason our species hasn't been consumed by chaos, devoured by tyrannids, or enslaved by any of 100 Xenos threats. Then I'll keep fighting for survival, Diana said. But I'll also keep showing that survival doesn't require abandoning compassion. That you can fight monsters without becoming one. That hope isn't heresy. It's the only thing that makes survival worth the cost. Covenant studied her, his scarred face thoughtful. You know they'll try to kill you eventually. Someone in the Imperium's vast bureaucracy will decide you're too dangerous, too independent, too much of a threat to established doctrine. They'll send assassins or declare you heretic, or simply arrange an accident. Let them try, Diana replied calmly. I've survived worse, and until they do, I'll keep fighting beside people who need help. In this universe or my own, that's what heroes do. Covenant smiled slightly, a rare expression. You're going to be trouble, Diana of Themyscira. I certainly hope so, Diana replied. 3 weeks in the 41st millennium taught Diana of Themyscira what 3,000 years in her own universe had only hinted at. That heroism wasn't about grand victories or final triumphs. It was about showing up every day, fighting the same battles over and over, and refusing to let darkness extinguish the light, even when that light had dimmed to barely a flicker. Tertius Prime would survive. The Chaos Uprising had been broken. The Genestealer nest purged, the immediate threats contained. Reinforcements were finally arriving from neighboring sectors. 3 Imperial Guard regiments, a contingent of Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests, and even rumors of an Adeptus Sororitas delegation coming to investigate reports of the Golden Warrior. The planet would rebuild, its people would return to their grinding existence, and the Imperium's machinery would grind forward as it always had. Diana stood in the landing bay, preparing to board an inquisitorial transport. Covenant had arranged passage to a nearby forge world where navigator houses maintained archives that might contain information about dimensional rifts. It was a thin hope, but hope nonetheless. Colonel Kasser approached with Sergeant Vale, both men showing the exhaustion of weeks of constant combat finally catching up with them. We owe you a debt that can't be repaid, Kasser said formally. You saved this world. 15,000 soldiers who would have died still breathe because you stood beside them. 3 million civilians owe you their lives. They owe their lives to your soldiers, Diana corrected. I just helped. The real heroes were the people who'd been fighting long before I arrived and will keep fighting long after I leave. Vale stepped forward, awkward in the way of soldiers attempting emotional honesty. Third Company wanted you to have this. He presented a company banner, worn and battle-scarred, marked with the Cadian gate symbol and 3 weeks of fresh battle honors. We added your name to the company roster, honorary member. We figured, well, you fought beside us. That makes you one of us, Emperor or no Emperor. Diana took the banner, genuinely moved. In 3,000 years, she'd received countless honors and accolades, but this, recognition from soldiers who'd bled beside her, who'd trusted her with their lives and seen her trust them with hers, this felt different, more real. "I'll treasure this," she said honestly, "and I'll remember every one of you. The courage you showed, the sacrifices you made, the humanity you maintained even when the universe tried to strip it away." Commissar Drask appeared, her expression less hostile than their first meeting, but no less intense. "I still don't know what you are," she admitted. "Saint? Heretic? Or something beyond Imperial classification. But I know what you did. You fought for humanity without requiring absolute faith. You showed that courage doesn't need dogma to survive." She paused. "That's dangerous, but maybe the Imperium needs dangerous ideas right now." Inquisitor Covenant waited by the transport ramp, his scarred face showing something that might have been respect or might have been calculation. Probably both. "Your search for home continues," he said as Diana approached. "I'll help where I can. Not from altruism, I'm not that charitable, but because I believe you're valuable. The Imperium needs warriors like you, needs reminders that humanity can be more than fear and duty and endless war. Even if that reminder comes from another universe entirely." Diana boarded the transport, taking one last look at Tertius Prime. The hive world stretched below her, a massive edifice of human determination, scarred by war but still standing. Millions of people living, working, fighting, hoping in one of the darkest corners of one of the darkest galaxies imaginable. And they endured. Not because they were superhuman, not because they were divinely blessed, but because they chose to. Every single day they chose survival over surrender, duty over despair, tomorrow over giving up. That, Diana realized, was the real miracle of the 41st millennium. Not the Emperor's power, not the Space Marine's strength, not even her own divine heritage. The miracle was ordinary humans facing impossible darkness and refusing to break, refusing to let horror make them less than human. As the transport lifted off, Diana thought about home, about Themyscira's beauty, about the clear moral lines of her universe, about the friends and family waiting for her return. She would find a way back. Covenant's information might lead to navigator charts, which might lead to dimensional rifts, which might lead home. It was a long chain of possibilities, but Diana had learned patience over 3 millennia. Until then, she had purpose. The 41st millennium needed heroes, needed someone to stand between darkness and the desperate, needed proof that evil could be defeated even when victory seemed impossible. She'd fought Ares across dimensions. She'd stood against Darkseid's tyranny. She'd faced gods and monsters and emerged victorious not through superior power, but through absolute refusal to compromise her principles. The 41st millennium was darker than anything she'd encountered. Its wars were more brutal, its horrors more pervasive, its moral compromises more necessary. But darkness wasn't new. Horror wasn't insurmountable. And compromise, while sometimes necessary, didn't have to become surrender. Diana of Themyscira, princess of the Amazons, daughter of Zeus, would continue her vigil, not because she sought glory or demanded worship, but because people needed protecting, and she had the strength to protect them. In any universe, in any millennium, that was what heroism meant. The transport broke atmosphere, and Tertius Prime became a fading point below. Ahead lay Forge Worlds, Navigator Archives, and the slim hope of finding passage home. Behind lay a planet saved, soldiers inspired, and the first seeds of something dangerous in the Imperium's carefully controlled garden. The idea that hope wasn't heresy, that courage didn't require absolute faith, that humanity might survive not despite compassion, but because of it. Wonder Woman had entered Warhammer 40K, and the 41st millennium, for all its grim darkness, would never quite be the same. Because sometimes, even in a universe where there is only war, someone needs to remember what they're fighting for. Someone needs to stand as living proof that the light hasn't gone out. It's just waiting for warriors brave enough to carry it forward. Diana closed her eyes and let the transport's engines lull her into meditation. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Next week, new horrors. Next month, perhaps, new hope of returning home. But tonight, she'd helped save a world. She'd shown soldiers that courage existed beyond duty, had proven that purity could endure in even the darkest places, had demonstrated that one person, one impossible, stubborn, compassionate person, could make a difference. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where there is only war, that was victory enough. The Emperor protects, the Imperium would say. But Diana knew a deeper truth. Humanity protects itself through courage and sacrifice and the refusal to let darkness have the final word. And as long as warriors, imperial, divine, or otherwise, stood ready to fight, darkness would never fully win. The journey home would be long. But Diana was patient, immortal, determined, and most importantly, she was Wonder Woman. Even here, especially here, in the 41st millennium's crushing darkness, that meant something. It meant hope. The Emperor protects. More stories await.